Fantastic. So the room is getting crowded. Hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Kati. I am the president of the committee, the organizing committee. So welcome to the symposium of CQ-AState. As the first speaker, we have our vice director that is here with us, Dr. Tila Sivakumaran, that is going to give us the welcome message, and then we will start with the first day of talks. Please, Dr. Tila, all voice for you. Thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Good afternoon to everybody there. I'm sorry I could not be there, but I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Kathy, and everybody for putting this STEM week together. I am really envious of all the things that you guys are doing, and I hope you have a wonderful week, of seminars and presentations. I wish we could do something similar here, but do more cross collaboration. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this, and I hope you have a wonderful event. Dr. Kathy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. We were supposed to have here the students from one of the projects we have running in the university. Oh, here it is, Jimena. Hello, hello. So just to introduce you, we decided this year to create a joint venture between CQ-AState and the Axolotarium projects, and so Jimena and a group prepared a small gift for each of the speakers and the judges. So I give the voice to Jimena just to explain in few words what the Axolotarium project is, and then we will start with the day.
Well, first of all, thank you. Well, I'm Jimena Gijon. I'm the vice president of the Axolotarium. First, I want to congratulate all the participants who are about to present. I'm sure they will deliver a great work. And I also want to take a moment to thank Dr. Kati for letting us collaborate in this event. We are sure that it will be a fascinating event with a lot of creative ideas. Also, I want to take a moment to share more about our project, the Axolotarium. So the Axolotarium aim is to preserve an endangered species here in Mexico, which is the ambystoma. We have a multidisciplinary team that is in charge of taking care of this species, learn about them, and also because we have people from all the majors here at the university, we are seeking to make a brand out of it and let all this knowledge that we can acquire during the journey and transmit it outside of the university. So it will be a pleasure to receive all of you next semester and see more of you visiting our Axolotarium. So thank you so much and congratulations to everyone.
Right, awesome. So to open up this CQ-AState, we're gonna have Jacqueline Romani Vargas, who is a senior undergraduate, and Istamar Hernandez Estrada, who is also a senior, with their project Antibacterial Photodynamic Activity of Hypericum performatum extract and its dental applications. These students, in their search of developing a photodynamic antibacterial treatment for applications in dentistry, produced a St. John's Wort flowers extract. Their mentors were Dr. Fernando Belmont and Dr. Fernando Perez. Please come to the front.
Where is she? Let's see her.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. We are Cristal Samar and Jacqueline Vargas.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me properly? Hello?
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
You can
thank you. Well, hello everyone. I'm Jacqueline Vargas, and we are very honored to be here opening the CQ-AState presentation event. And we are also very honored to be representing both the collaboration of AState Querétaro and AState Jonesboro. So without further ado, let me present to you the antibacterial photodynamic activity of Hypericum perforatum extract. You have probably seen this image before, antibiotic resistance. This is one of the current greatest threats to human health. And do you know which one is another one of the greatest threats? Cancer. Although there are several treatments available, there is no one-size-fits-all treatment. And every day we're still seeking for novel therapies. One of these novel therapies is photodynamic therapy, or PDT, which makes use of a molecule called photosensitizer, which under normal conditions is inactive. However, when exposed to light of a specific wavelength or a specific color, it becomes activated. When activated and in the presence of oxygen, it produces reactive oxygen species, also called ROS. These damage proteins, nucleic acids, and important components of the cells. Therefore, they cause cell death, which can be used to kill bacteria or certain cancers.
Okay, but what are the advantages of this photodynamic therapy? So one of the things is that it doesn't create resistance like, well, antibiotics do. It's also not an invasive technique. You can target a specific site. And also it produces minimal side effects, which means that it's advantageous because of this. But you can also receive an immediate effect. Okay, but what is a photosensitizer? Well, it's basically a molecule that can be activated by light of a specific wavelength. So this generates the reactive oxygen species we talked about. And these molecules are highly conjugated. They can be heterocyclic or tricyclic. And ideal photosensitizers should be activated by light of longer wavelength and not shorter wavelength, because shorter wavelength can also lead to toxicity. Also, ideal photosensitizers should be absorbed selectively by the tissue of interest. Okay, but we are focused on Hypericum perforatum, which is commonly known as St. John's wort. This is a flowering plant that is known for its anti-inflammatory, antiviral, and antidepressant properties. It contains active compounds such as hypericin and hyperforin. Hypericin is this reddish pigment that can be found in the buds of the flower, but you can also find it in the seeds. And this natural photosensitizer is usually activated around 600 to 700 nanometers of wavelength, which is like yellow or orange light.
Okay, so after knowing this, we had the question, can we obtain a Hypericum perforatum extract with photodynamic activity? For this, we had two objectives. Our first objective was to develop a replicable method to obtain a Hypericum perforatum extract. And our second objective was to test this extract for its antibacterial photodynamic activity against a common bacteria called Escherichia coli or E. coli. So why did we decide to do this? Well, because previous literature indicates that hypericin has already been used as a photosensitizer in photodynamic antimicrobial therapy, such as in this paper where it is tested against clinically isolated pathogens. This other paper where they tested against hypericin, against Escherichia coli, and it showed great effects. But why did we decide to use the extract instead of hypericin itself? Well, because obtaining the extract is more convenient than purifying hypericin. It is also less expensive since 10 milligrams of hypericin are around $878, And the extract potentially contains compounds such as hypericin, hyperforin, other hypericin derivatives, and flavonoids, which together can have a synergistic effect in antibacterial photodynamic activity. So let's talk about our first objective, how we developed the method to obtain a Hypericum perforatum extract. For this, we used a powder coming from the flowers of the plant. And first, we did Soxhlet extraction. First, with dichloromethane to remove all the possible chlorophylls, and second, with methanol to obtain our compounds of interest. Then we purified through column chromatography using mobile phases of increasing polarity, which are chloroform acetone, and methanol dichloromethane acetone. Then we did fraction selection and drying to obtain a reddish Hypericum perforatum extract. These are our spectrophotometry results, which show a peak at around 570 nanometers or yellow light and around 650 nanometers or red light. These results were very promising because the reported absorptions of hypericin, the photosensitizer, at around 595 and 640 nanometers.
Okay, now for our second objective, which is to test this antibacterial photodynamic activity on our extract on E. coli. So for this, we divided the biological test into two groups, the experimental conditions and the controls. In the experimental conditions, we tested two wavelengths. So we used E. coli plus our extract and blue light, also E. coli plus our extract and red light. For the controls, we had the bacteria with just distilled water, the bacteria with just blue light, the bacteria with just red light, and the bacteria with just the extract. We delivered our extract using 1% DMSO and also distilled water. After having set all the proper conditions, we passed them to wells for proper irradiation. We irradiated for 5 minutes and then proceeded to do the plating. After that, we incubated around 22 hours and at 35 degrees Celsius. Afterwards, we did the colony counting and comparison. So here are the different conditions that we used. We can clearly see that the one that has the highest colony forming units is the one that only contains the bacteria and distilled water. While the one that contains the lowest colony forming units is the one that contains the bacteria, our extract, and the light irradiation. Okay, here's a visual representation of the most noticeable results. So in the middle, we have our control that only contains light irradiation and the bacteria. And on the top, we have light irradiation, the bacteria, and our extract, which are the experimental groups. Here we can see the red light and over there, the blue light. Okay, so after having set a proper protocol, we decided to repeat it another 4 times. So in total, we had 5 trials. Here we can clearly see that we calculated an 89.5% eradication for the PDT group using blue light and a 94.2% eradication for the PDT group using red light. And here we're only comparing it to the control that used distilled water and E. coli.
So from our study, we can conclude that we have developed a replicable methodology for obtaining a Hypericum perforatum flower extract that has antibacterial photodynamic activity. This would support the potential use of our extract in antibacterial photodynamic therapy.
Okay, but where do we want to take this? We want to take it to dentistry. What are some ways in which we can apply it? So we can use it for the removal of dental plaque, so to avoid cavities. We can also use it to treat fungal diseases like oral candidiasis. We can use it for endodontics, implantology, to avoid infections and treatment failure. And we can use it to treat oral cancer or early stages of oral cancer right now. So any tumors in the head or neck region. Right now, we are focused on dental decay. Why? Because it's one of the most prevalent factors in society. So Streptococcus mutans is this facultative anaerobic bacteria that is the main contributor to dental decay. And how does it do this? Well, when we ingest our sugars, we are feeding this bacteria. And this bacteria grows biofilms in our teeth, which is this whitish sticky substance that maybe you have noticed. And this leads to acid production, which generates the dental decay that we can see in that image.
Thus, for our future research, we have acquired a strain of Streptococcus mutans, and we will soon start testing our extract against these bacteria to evaluate the possible applications in dental photodynamic therapy.
Okay, finally, we want to thank our mentors and our colleagues that collaborated in this research. Thank you so much for your attention, and if you have any questions, feel free to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. It was, I think, most of it. As part of the grade safety meeting, we went to do this and
Yes, we're here.
and please give a round of applause for the amazing.
Thank you. For questions. Oh, okay. So first, raise your hand.
You mentioned that
Yes.
this kind of therapy favors the active oxygen,
Yes.
which can affect the structure of the cell.
Mm-hmm.
How can you make sure that the reactive oxygen only attack bacterial cells and not, for example, cells in the gums of their
Mhm.
cells?
Yes.
How can you make them effectively active?
Yes, so here it is because we are only selecting a specific tissue. For example, we are focused on dental decay. So you will be focused on the enamel. And in that case, like whatever bacteria you kill in that moment is not going to affect the whole gums. You're not applying it on all the mouth. And the thing about this is that the only thing that will be eradicated is the one that is irradiated with light. So even if you have a bit of the extract on other parts of your gums, or let's say that by accident you spread it to other areas, it will not be effective since it's not going to be the one irradiated.
Yes, to add on to that answer, as Crystal said, the application of these photosensitizers can be very selective, and also as she said, it only becomes activated when you're irradiating it with the specific wavelength of light. So for example, dentists have curing lights that are very precise in where you irradiate.
Yes. Okay, so hypericin, it's the main photosensitizer we're focused on. So they're both active components, but hyperforin, has been studied more for antidepressant properties, and hypericin for its photodynamic properties, like for what we're studying right now. So that's the main difference. Of course, they also vary in structure, and these two active components can be found in the same extract as well. Jackie,
Yeah.
do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to add that hyperforin has no reported photodynamic activity as of now.
Okay.
There are some questions from the chat.
Okay.
With
Do you want
external
to-
condition control, like temperature of the environment?
What? Sorry, I did. What external condition? Oh. So it's referring to, I don't understand the question, like what conditions we used, or?
I don't know why I cannot see the chat.
Is there a way that we can ask, like what conditions we used in the lab, or?
You can ask like you're
Sorry. Yeah, like for that question, are you referring to the conditions that we used in the lab, or is there a specific temperature required for this photodynamic activity?
Actually, I was talking about what environmental conditions were there when you were growing the bacteria?
Mhm.
Was it controlled? Or for
Um,
example, was there extreme heat, extreme cold?
mhm.
Who knows?
Actually, it was at room temperature, and it was mainly under like sterile conditions because we wanted to make sure that there was no contaminations. But like a specific temperature, no. Only during incubation we used 37 degrees Celsius.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you.
There are two other questions over there.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. Can I read it out loud so she can? So the spectrophotometer results show peaks in the blue and green range. It is likely that your extract still contains chlorophyll or other pigments. Okay, so we can both answer that. Yes, it is likely, but that's why we do the oxalate extraction to remove most of the chlorophylls. We are not saying that it's like 100% pure. That's why it's an extract. Jackie, do you want to add something regarding that part?
Yeah, it is possible that we have chlorophylls or other compounds still in the extract. We would like to do further purification if we are able in the future, and to have a better characterization of the extract, also to know exactly which compounds we have in our extract and how they are acting together.
Okay. What characterization analysis did you perform for your extract? Purity, concentration applied in bacterial assay. Okay, so it's asking for any characterization analysis. Right now, what we have is like the absorbance. We can also be able to measure with the equipment that we have right now. For example, it can only be with the spectrophotometry. We can also even measure pH, but right now we don't have an equipment like HPLC to actually characterize what our extract, what we are obtaining. Jackie?
Yeah, exactly. If possible in the future, if we have access to better characterization equipment, we would like to definitely do a better characterization of the extract.
Yes. More questions? Yes. I don't know how.
Beautiful work, but I would just like to know if you have any thoughts on how you would go about attesting the potential safety for going from these in vitro studies towards thinking about patients, even in terms of dentistry. You would be, putting something into the oral cavity, which has a lot of blood flow to it, so that any substance gets really swiftly absorbed by the sublingual area irrigation. So.
That's a great question.
Okay.
So, yeah, do you want to answer first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so to test the extract, we would first start with eukaryotic organisms such as yeast. And we don't have access to cell culture facilities, but that would be a good first step to take it to in vivo studies, if we ever have the opportunity to test it on cell culture. And as for the safety of the extract, since we don't have a characterization of the compounds present in the extract, we cannot say for sure, but this plant is also used as a tea in different preparations that people consume for its antidepressant or anti-inflammatory properties, and no toxic effects have been shown before. So we are thinking it could potentially be safe to use, but we would definitely need to do testing in eukaryotic organisms.
Yes. Also, it's important to mention that this type of therapy has already started to being tested. Actually, there is this study done on periodontitis, and they don't use this natural photosensitizer as we are doing, but there are actually in the US some photosensitizers that have already been legally approved, like photopherine and other chemical ones. So yes, that speaks a lot of the potential that it can have. Any other questions? All good? Okay, Well, thank you everyone for your attention and hope you really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for all of you. Our next project, our next presentation is the Keeping Up with an Even Changing Landscape, the case of the Iberian lynx. Undergraduate students Pablo Torres and Jimena Zamora Prieto will present the case of the Iberian lynx and how its population has variated due to human activity, invasive species, and diseases. Now, a big round of applause for them, please.
Yeah. Just like this? Okay. Um, so hello, everyone. We are Zamora, and we will talk about keeping up with an ever-changing landscape, the case of the Iberian lynx, Lynx parinus.
Okay, sorry for the presentation being a little bit messed up. I think it's something with the font. But anyways, the Iberian lynx is considered the most endangered feline in the world. It is native to the Iberian Peninsula, which is found in southwestern Europe, encompassing the countries of Spain and Portugal. Some of the characteristics of this animal is that it has which in some crops in the country. And this virus extended throughout rabbit populations in Europe, eventually affecting Spain and Portugal. Due to this and other factors, in the 1990s, we saw a population decline from 15 subpopulations all the way to only 2 subpopulations in this decade. And the problem worsened by the 2000s when the Iberian lynx lost 80% of its former range, with only 92 individuals being left. As of recently, in 2021, the population has been brought up thanks to a lot of conservation efforts to about 1,111 individuals.
Okay, the objectives of this review are to create awareness about the Iberian lynx situation and to explore the causes that contributed to the species decline, and also to determine why this species must be protected and to provide an outlook for the future. The methodology followed consisted on obtaining information from official sources like IUCN, WWF, WWF, and ISEC, and from scientific articles. We collected the data, and here we are discussing it. These are the main causes that took Iberian lynx population to critical low levels, and we will talk about each of these. Starting with poaching, that before the 70s, 33% of mortality represented illegal trapping. And this changed when Spain government hardened wildlife hunting regulations. But then the traps used for hunting other animals also killed lynxes by accident. So 4.2% represents this accidental hunting. Nowadays, different programs are allowing the use of temporal collars for tracking to check if the lynxes are doing okay in the wild. And this reduced a lot these threats. As we all know, urbanization affects species in many different ways. And in the case of Iberian lynx, the original population was severely fragmented to the point that 80% of the population was lost. And if this was not bad enough, fragmentation also provoked morphological consequences due to inbreeding. There's nothing new on saying how much humans pollute habitats and affect a lot of species. And one of the main threats of these linked species is roadkills. Besides roads fragmenting habitats, 16.7% is a number for car hits that end on lynx death.
Further causes of the Iberian lynx decline over the years are mainly based on the decline of its main prey species, which are wild rabbits. And as mentioned, one of the main causes of rabbit decline is caused by the myxoma virus, which causes an infection called myxomatosis. Myxomatosis is caused by the myxoma virus introduced in the 50s, and some of the main symptoms are swelling on the eyelids of the rabbits and also skin rashes. Eventually, really bad cases of myxomatosis can lead to death. The good thing is that we can see in this graph that the relative prevalence of myxomatosis has been decreasing since the end of the 1980s. And this is mainly thanks to vaccination being applied to not only wild rabbit populations, but also breeding centers and other institutions that have rabbits. We can see that the prevalence nowadays is rather negligible, which helps the lynx populations quite a bit. And the virus by this point has become settled, which means that it is in a control state that varies with seasonality, with increasing prevalence from October to December. Another cause of rabbit decline is rabbit hemorrhagic disease, which is another disease caused by a virus, this time the RHDV virus, which has been present in Spain and Portugal since 1988. Some of the symptoms that this virus causes are bleeding from the nose and the mouth, fever, muscle spasms, and eventually death. This virus has had less of an impact in rabbit populations throughout the years when compared to myxomatosis. And we can see that the prevalence has also been rather low throughout the years, with a pretty big spike or an epidemic starting in 2011 and all the way to 2013. It is suspected that the cause for this spike is mainly because the vaccines that were being applied to rabbits were not protecting against some heterologous viruses, so viruses that were slightly similar to the virus that the vaccine was protecting. But by now it is controlled again. When we also have feline leukemia, which is another virus, this time the FeLV retrovirus, which affects the lynxes directly, not its prey. This started as an outbreak in 2007 in Doñana National Park, which is one of the main populations of lynxes in Spain. And this virus causes acute anemia. It can cause leukemia and lymphoma in lynxes, which cause death in 6 months. So it's very devastating to the lynxes. This outbreak likely happened because lynxes suffer a lot of interspecific fighting, especially with wild cats. And other causes for this outbreak is that populations in Doñana National Park had a really high density, which means that the lynxes were interacting with each other. The lynxes were fed only one rabbit for a lot of lynxes. So the lynxes would fight over the rabbit or intra-specific fighting. And also the first contact with the virus happened before the breeding season for the lynxes. So this caused the virus to spread very rapidly throughout the national park. This outbreak was controlled eventually, and the prevention of another outbreak involves mainly reducing intraspecific fighting of the lynxes, which means feeding one lynx, one rabbit at a time, so they don't fight for the same rabbit.
Now, what has been done to protect a Iberian lynx population? First, the development of captive breeding programs that include designated areas where lynxes can be protected and where they can reproduce and where their offspring can grow up safely, followed by reintroduction to the wild using the radio telemetry collars that I mentioned previously. And then ecosystem conservation by promoting reforestation, by hardening urbanization and land use policies, and by increasing informative campaigns to increase awareness about the situation. Of course, establishing punishment to shooters and when specific traps were forbidden to avoid any accidental killings. Promoting patch links to reduce fragmentation. All of these have helped a lot links recovery. And about rabbit recovery, it has been quite a challenge because vaccines are still being developed, and treating all or most of the rabbits, it's kind of difficult. So monitoring health of domestic animals has been a better approach for this, for helping rabbit population, hence lynx population.
So the project of protection of the Iberian lynx in Spain and Portugal has been successful so far, but that is not to say that the problem is solved. Lynx populations throughout their range are still not viable, which is why what's next? We need to continue expanding the range of the Iberian lynx because the populations are not viable and still depend on reintroduction of individuals. Also, we need to develop even more captive breeding programs because captive breeding must continue or the species faces extinction in a predicted amount of years, in 35 years actually. Also, we need to continue with prey conservation since this is the main driver of lynx extinction is not having prey, and the lynx is very dependent on rabbits specifically, so they're very specialists. And finally, we need to consider climate change. As with all ecological problems, climate change needs to be a considered variable because if we are expanding the range of the lynx, we need to consider if the regions we're expanding to are suitable for the lynx to inhabit. And if they are not suitable, we need to consider what actions need to be taken to make these regions suitable. So climate change as always needs to be considered. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah. I can repeat the question after yes. Okay, so Dr. Miguelena asked for me to speak about conservation at a landscape level. So yes, the landscape is a very important factor for the Iberian lynx because fragmentation is a big problem for these populations. So basically, if you're trying to look at conservation from a landscape perspective, the main thing that needs to be taken into account is the fragmentation of the habitat. And one of the main drivers of fragmentation is the creation of roads throughout Spain and Portugal. So as Jimena mentioned, there's a lot of roadkill that has been affected in the Iberian lynx. And this is because lynxes need to cover a wide area to hunt for rabbits. And commonly these wide areas are interrupted by roads with drivers riding at high speeds. So you can see actually a lot of examples throughout Doñana National Park and other parts of Spain and Portugal that are known to have lynx populations where signs for caution because there are lynx crossings and also limitations in the speed limit in certain areas have been performed. But ideally, we need to connect subpopulations of lynxes to eventually lead to viable populations throughout both countries. Any other questions? Should I in the chat? Oh, someone raise their hand. Please speak up if you want to ask a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, this is Jose from Facultad de Ciencias, UNAM. I have a question. Do you know if the domestic fauna, like cats and dogs, where these lynxes live, are vaccinated against different pathogens, mainly viruses such as parvovirus? I mean, surely lynxes have an absent immune system against these agents that could represent a serious risk to their survival.
Yes, of course. Jimena is going to answer this question.
Ideally, they should be vaccinated And actually, that was a main point for the conservation of Iberian lynx, like monitoring the health of domestic animals that live in the area where the lynx are, because yeah, they represent a lot of risk to rabbits and to lynxes. So yeah, ideally they should be monitoring the health and the vaccines.
And also to add to this, I mean, it's easy to control these sort of things, for example, in national parks, where you have limited access for fauna to the national park. But it's way harder when the lynx populations are distributing along urban areas, for example, and it's always domestic cats cause a bunch of problems to local fauna. So this is a very interesting point of view and a very important thing to consider if eventually the lynx does establish as a local population, because cats can carry a lot of disease. So ideally they should be vaccinated, but it's hard to know for sure. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you very much for your participation. Please give them another round of applause. Next in our program, we got undergraduate Santiago Minuti with IM Academics Persuasive Strategies during the COVID-19 pandemic. This research aims to analyze and showcase IM's academic persuasive techniques and tactics while making a comparison with similar pyramid scheme strategies. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to present about IM Academy's persuasive strategies during the COVID-19 pandemic. Persuasion is not the same as manipulation. The spread of online persuasive strategies was the main method to impulse the purchases during the COVID-19 pandemic and the social distancing periods. However, manipulative practices came along the way, and one of the companies that took advantage of this was IM Academy. To give you a little bit of context, IM Academy is an investment software company which opened in 2013 by Christopher Terry. The company focuses on providing investing, mentoring, and lessons to teach people about the first steps to learn how to do investing in different ways, for example, in cryptocurrencies or in the foreign exchange investment. However, the company has also been accused of several, has been in part of several accusations of being pyramid schemes and also coercive sects. The difference between the coercive sects, multi-level marketing, and pyramid schemes is that while some of these companies have, for example, MLMs, are mainly focused on providing a service, and they give you like option of getting some extra money from getting some new people to your groups. The difference with the coercive and pyramid schemes is that in pyramid schemes, they do have also a service. However, they focus mainly on recruiting, and the coercive sects only rely on your money. Just want you to have more of you to grow and to just get wealthy, and only those that get wealthy are the ones that are at the top of the scheme. Out of the 3 branches that we have internationally, we have mainly in Latin America and in Mexico, Evo Movement. These 3 branches mainly focus only on recruiting and giving you these mentoring and motivational speeches on how to gather these people. They do work along with IM Academy, and their only purpose is to do that, to recruit them and make them join to IM Academy. It should also be noted that this company reached its highest peak during the COVID-19 pandemic, and these persuasive strategies were strengthened during the same period. The purpose of this research was to identify IM Academy's persuasive strategies that mimic pyramid schemes and coercive sects. It was also to identify the methods and tools used by IM Academy to get the trust of the university students during the COVID-19 pandemic. This research decided to analyze just 5 pieces or 5 elements of their different channels of communication of IM Academy and Evo Movement. The ones that I decided to choose was mainly the website of Amian Academy, a YouTube video with the Evo Movement CEO, I Am Academy's presentation by Alex Morton, a Flow My Weather's new partnership with I Am Academy, and lastly, an annual summit that they do yearly. And for this research, I decided to take the 2022 edition. It should also be noted that all of this research and the analysis was based on previous research to compare what was the similar patterns that you can see between pyramid schemes, coercive sects, and also these companies that are called multi-level marketing businesses. So let's start. And also, I'm sorry, just for the time constraints, I'm just gonna focus on showing these images rather than the entire audiovisual content due to the time constraints. And let's start with the I Am Academy's website. Well, most of the content on this website was mainly questioning the user, what they would do with their future, what are their expectations, and what they would like to do for having an economical stability. The website mainly relies on showing their CEOs, their founders, and their successful people of the organization. The thing is that even if they mainly focus on showing the success and the richness that people do, is that we are lacking of a lot of information. And there's no background information on who they are. But if we dig deeply into each and every one of their previous involvements, we can find that at least that in most of these leaders, at least the majority of them have previously been affiliated to a pyramid scheme, which have been already shut down by the US government. To give you some examples, the founder and CEO, Chris Terry, has been affiliated with the pyramid scheme called BIMA, and also Seek Rewards, which once again were shut down by the US government back in 2011. We also, if you just perceive this, we're just showing you that they are their founders, that they are the leaders, that they are successful. And actually, if we go deeper into the website, we are just seeing the successful events that they have, how they are enjoying their richness, and everything that they are doing successfully. The issue here is that due to the lack of information, we're just seeing a little bit of who they are, which generates a halo effect. A halo effect means that we base our persuasion or our ideas based on only one of their characteristics. This means that if, for example, in this case, we're seeing that there's a person that is rich, that is successful, we can consider them as trustworthy. We can consider them that we can rely on them and that we can invest our money on what they're doing. Once again, the executive vice president has also been of the pyramid scheme called BIMA. And once again, the only way to find more information about who they are is not through their official accounts, but rather doing some research into governmental and some other pieces of journalism to find out who they truly are. Now, moving on to another piece of analysis was the Evo Movement CEO presentation video of I Am Academy and Evo Movement. Here, once again, we're just presenting of what is Evo Movement and how they relate to I Am Academy. What is the issue here? We notice that even though they have this detailed description of what is the business, they mainly have a detailed attention to the recruitment process. And as previous research suggests, is when a pyramid scheme or a coercive set can be identified is due to the due to how focused they are on recruiting. And just to consider, this video was around 7 minutes, and the time that it took to explain their recruiting plans and the rewards that you could get was around 4 minutes, which means that more than half of the video was mainly focused on recruiting. And once again, just to move aside the perspective of being a pyramid scheme, we are seeing that the presenter explains or gives us some examples of what is their organization, but also just giving us that they are not a pyramid scheme by giving examples of other recurring plans, such as universities, entertainment companies, just to move aside the perspective of that they are a pyramid scheme. And this misdirection of information is mainly called mere exposure cognitive bias, which once again means that you try to familiarize the viewer with previous examples to make them believe what you're saying based on previous experience. And lastly, we have the plain language. When we are introducing to new topics, regardless of the area, we tend to understand more the topics when we are using simplified descriptions and simplified language. In these videos and almost in all of their content, they use simplified language to help us understand what they mean. However, when you start joining the company, you are noticing that this simple terminology is not as simple as they trying to give you. The issue here is that they are selling you the idea that anyone can learn easily. But the problem is that when you start being part of the organization, you notice that that is not the truth. The third piece of, the third element for this research was the Alex Morton's IM Academy presentation. And once again, as I previously mentioned, the presenter just shows himself as this rich and successful being. However, we're not introduced to his background information. Once again, he was affiliated with VIMA, as well as 2 other pyramid schemes that were shut down by the US government. And once again, we're seeing that they are showcasing plain language to make you understand these complex concepts that cannot be understood by starters in the investment business. An apology for the title mistake, but the Floyd Mayweather introduction or presentation video and affiliation to IM Academy in 2020 was actually very successful for the company, because this not only meant that a successful boxer with millions of dollars was affiliating with the business, but was also meaning that they could be given more trust since they are having this successful image. However, this is only an influencer marketing strategy, which relies on generating more sales thanks to this powerful image. And the research suggests that even though it's expensive to rely on this strategy, it does give back a lot of sales on the business. Lastly, one of the main pieces of analysis was the Evo Movement Summits. They yearly have these gatherings where they present what they are and show you how to motivate yourself to stay in the business. The problem is, once again, is that they have this relationship with coercive sects and pyramid schemes. For example, the good and evil division, us against them. What the professor Alejandro Rodriguez of the University of Barcelona in 2004 suggests that coercive sects rely on saying that we as a company are the good ones, and anyone else who doesn't want to join us is the evil people. So once again, even though they do not categorize as sects, neither as pyramid schemes, they are showing these patterns of being the good ones, and the rest of the people that do not join us are the evil ones. Once again, they show you in this presentation, as we are seeing in the title of Alejandra Villarreal in this image, she's giving these presentations of perspective. Every presentation and every conference of these summits mainly rely on showing you how to recruit more people, how to keep your people, how to teach your family, how to be with your family. They teach you that it doesn't matter the rest of the people that think that you are wrong, that you are the best, and that their business is the only trustworthy one. And also, the way that these summits are so powerful and so impactful to the business can be explained through the need to belong theory. The need to belong theory is a theory that explains that us as individuals mainly rely on gathering these relationships, and that we need to belong to a group. And what it explains is also that welcoming an invitation generates these positive emotions that makes you want to be part of the group. Each and every of the summits only want to introduce you to the business. They feel you welcome, but they also have these, per se, rituals that want to introduce you to a new way of thinking. They want you to think as the rest. They make you stand up. They make you be motivated to be one of the group. And still, they are these supporting links to commit to the organization. Also, what they theory suggests is that the mere presence creates a motivation. It doesn't matter if they don't have like a deep relationship. Just having someone next to you does show a strength, does motivate you to be part of the group. And this, once again, can be seen in the coercive sex patterns. Lastly, I just want to highlight that the persuasion strategies were even more successful during the pandemic. Research suggests that loneliness levels increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what happens is that coercive sects do take advantage of these moments. Alejandro Rodriguez, the professor of the University of Barcelona in 2004, mentions that coercive sects tend to tackle people that are lonely and that have these detachment periods. We consider that after March of 2020, we started taking apart from the society due to the social distancing periods. We can notice that coercive sects take the advantage of how to tackle to people, how to sell to people. And it doesn't matter if they were not able to have these summits face to face. Even they could do it online and still getting more people. Thank you. As for the conclusions, we can identify that IM Academy's limited information about the leaders and who they are focusing on generated a halo effect that depart from the success and make the recruits base their trust on them. Recruitment and retention strategies mimic the ones from pyramid schemes and coercive sects. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic contributed to recruitment processes as the loneliness period of the COVID-19 pandemic, generating these needs and these advantages of the coercive sects to gather the people. For future knowledge, it should be noted that that interviews to both current and previous members of the company could contribute to more personal identification of the persuasive approach in different contexts. And further research can also contribute to impact on social distancing, persuasive advertising, and other companies, not only pyramid schemes. And lastly, this research identified identical patterns between sects and pyramid schemes in IM Academy. However, this does not mean that IM Academy per se is a pyramid scheme or a coercive sect. Each government has their own laws and their own processes to identify this. But this research, focused mainly on the legal framework, could also provide more insight on this matter. So these are only the last reference that I consider, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your participation. Sadly, we don't have any time left for questions. So please give Santiago another round of applause. Next in our program, we got design and synthesis of DNA methyltransferase inhibitors by PhD student Diana Lorena Prado Romero, supervised by Dr. Andre Posani. The one?
It's not Dr. Andre Posani. It's me.
Oh, well, Dr. Katy.
Juan Luis Medina.
And Juan Luis Medina. All right. So, PhD student Diana Lorena Prado Romero focused her work on two DNA methyltransferase inhibitors with novel scaffolds to be used as frameworks to optimize the synthesis of 10 different products. Please give her a round of applause.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. Today I'm going to talk about the design and synthesis of DNA methyltransferase inhibitors. First of all, DNA methyltransferases, or DNMTs, are enzymes that catalyze the transfer of a methyl group to the cytosines present in the DNA sequence. The donor of the methyl group is the cofactor SAM, and as a product, and yields the product SAH after the catalytic reaction. DNMTs are involved in functions like the regulation of gene expression. And as a consequence, if there is an alteration of the methylation pattern, diseases like some types of cancer could appear. And that's a reason why DNMT inhibition is an important strategy to the design of new drugs. The motivation of this project was to find new DNMT inhibitors. And although we have 2 DNMT inhibitors approved to clinical use, they have disadvantages like poor bioavailability and toxicity. And so that's the importance to, so there is a need to expand the chemical space of these particular compounds. For that, we selected 4 novel hits with activity against the DNMT1. All of them have novel scaffolds, that is, chemical structures that have not been observed previously in compounds with activity against the DNMTs. So with the chosen hits, we began to make, to change the substituents in the positions marked here with red and green for these 2 examples. And then we did molecular docking to calculate the predicted poses and binding scores. Here in this slide, I'm showing the resulting poses for the compound 79 in pink and CSC in yellow. And as we can observe, both of them have very similar 3-dimensional conformations. We also used a risk-scoring function called ECIF that has a better correlation with PIC50 values. And then taking all these results into account, we selected the derivatives to synthesize. We obtained some analogs from compound 79 and also from compound CSC. And now I'm going to detail more about the synthesis of the analogs from CSC, where we began to change the R group. That this R group includes 5-member heterocyclic rings and some aryl groups. We took compound 3 as a model to propose the retrosynthetic analysis. And we began with the disconnection of the piperazine and the aromatic carbon to obtain the final product 3 from an ethyl bromobenzoate and compound 2. This compound 2 could be obtained from an acetyl piperazine and O1B if we disconnect the piperazine and the aliphatic carbon. And finally, to obtain the compound O1B, we disconnected the amide and we could synthesize with fluoranilene and chloroacetyl chloride. And next, we began the synthetic routes for fluoranilene and chloroacetyl chloride in the presence of 3-ethylamine and successfully obtained compound O1B. Then we continue with the substitution that was carried out with compound O1B and acetyl piperazine in the presence of potassium iodide to synthesize compound 1. Then the acyl group was removed with hydrochloric acid to obtain compound 2. And with the free amide of 2 and ethyl bromobenzoate, we try to form the final carbon-nitrogen bond under the condition of a Buchwald-Hardwick coupling in the presence of a palladium catalyst. Unfortunately, we obtained a complex mixture of compounds, so we decided to change our retrosynthetic analysis and now began the disconnection between the piperazine and the aliphatic carbon. So now we could obtain the final product 3 from the same O1B using the same conditions previously mentioned with fluoranilene and chloracetyl chloride, and also from compound 7. This compound 7 could be obtained from a protected piperazine and ethyl bromobenzoate. If we disconnect the piperazine and the aromatic carbon. And now, as we said earlier, the acylyl group of the piperazine was removed with hydrochloric acid. And under these conditions, the ester present in the benzoate also hydrolyzes. So we needed to change the protecting group. And for that, we began the synthesis of compound 7 from ethyl bromobenzoate and APOC piperazine under the same conditions of the Woodward-Hardwick coupling in the presence of a palladium catalyst, and obtained compound 11. Now, and then the protecting group was removed with 3-fluoroacetic acid to have the free amine of 7. And with compound 7 and compound 01B, we did the final substitution in the presence of potassium iodide to obtain the final desired product 3. Once the synthetic route was established, we changed the aniline with different amines to obtain different analogs. And the final compounds that we obtained were DLP3 that we used as the model, and also 18 and 19 with 5-member heterocyclic rings. And the perspective for these 3 final compounds is to evaluate them with enzymatic inhibition assays against the NMT1. And finally, I would like to thank all the persons involved in this project. And this work was conducted under the guidance of Dr. Cathy, and also with the collaboration of Natalia Reyes and Atali Ventura here in Arkansas State, and at the University of Barcelona in the lab of Dr. Rodolfo Lavilla, to all my research group back in UNAM, my supervisor and our funding institutions. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Lorena. If there are any questions, there is space for any of you, so she can answer them. Yes, Dr. Belmont.
Thank you very much. First of all, amazing work. Congratulations. I know how much a big effort is to synthesize the science and then apply the structure that you have performed. I'm mostly intrigued in number 6. I don't know if you can share it with me. Yes, about this one in the palladium coupling, are you attempting some sort of a Suzuki coupling or like a Heck coupling? Is that what you're aiming for? Yes. Oh, okay. But then there was another one which you were successful in the coupling with the palladium. Which one was it? Okay. Can you share with us a perspective of the yield that you got for this coupling for the palladium one? Have you considered the possibility to use diazo salts? Because usually when I have the same problem, especially with Heck reactions, that they don't work correctly with me, then I go with diazo salts. And those actually have higher energy release, which make the process thermodynamically favorable. Okay, also faster. Unfortunately, I don't know if the nitro group that you might have in order to create that the The partner of that bromide might, synthetically speaking, be complicated due to the fact that has already been oxidized if we aim for the diazo salt. Okay. Yet, I think it would be interesting to explore and also cheaper, right? Because I know that palladium complexes are expensive to perform. Okay. And finally, this is kind of a comment, but now my question, which would be the next, another question, which was the docking program that you used? With Bina, and have you tried Autodock? Okay. And the binding energies that you managed to achieve around how much? Okay, so in average, very good. And finally, which would be the perspectives for the future about your work?
Yes, sorry. We are planning to synthesize more derivatives for now. And of course, if we obtain good results of the enzymatic inhibition assays, we could do IC50 values. We could obtain IC50 values and continue like looking to optimize the scaffold mainly.
Is there any other question? Let's see. Okay. Then he asks, chemical reactions usually generate a lot of chemical waste. In your synthesis process, did you consider reducing chemical waste?
That's a very good question. But no, for this stage, we didn't consider like reducing chemical waste, like have the palladium, toluene, and dichloromethane. So not yet, yes.
I think it's, I think the point is to find the better biological activity and then trying to optimize the synthesis, taking into consideration all the green chemistry as a second step.
Well, big round of applause if there is no more any questions. A big round of applause. Okay. Now, following our schedule and our presentations, yes. Yes, we have a hypothetical ancestral reconstruction of alpha-actinin 3. I wait. ¿Me espero que todos estén? Well, undergraduate senior Maria Jose Espinosa Garza aimed to obtain the structure of hypothetical ancestor proteins of alpha-actinin 3 in order to evaluate the relevance to cold resistance by using protein reconstruction analysis and ancestral sequences reconstruction softwares. Her mentor was Dr. Bernardo Perez. Please give her a very big applause.
Hello, thank you so much for being here today. As he said, my name is Maria Jose Espinosa, and oh yes, sorry, I was somehow thinking ahead. Yes. My name is Maria Jose Espinosa. Thank you very much for being here. The study I will present to you today is about a fascinating protein which is located at the C discs of fast-twitch skeletal muscle fibers, and it is called alpha-actinin 3. It is very important for muscle contraction since its main role is to cross-link and bind the actin filaments of contiguous sarcomeres. This is the table of content. Okay, so here you can see this tiny bit, this green protein here are the alpha-actinin 3. And they are here located at the C line. So, however, what makes this protein very interesting is its genetic variation. Actin 3 is the gene that codes for alpha-actinin 3, and there is a nonsense polymorphism called R577X, which is caused by a base substitution from a cytosine to a thymine, which causes an arginine base to be changed into a stop codon, leading to premature stop. So the XX homozygotes have a deficiency in this protein in their muscles, which is also correlated with a deficiency in the percentage of fast-twitch muscle fibers. Okay. So fast-twitch skeletal muscle fibers, or type 2, are the muscles that are in charge of making fast contractions like weightlifting or sprints. In contrast, slow twitch muscle fibers, or type 1 muscle fibers, are those in charge of contractions that are slower but require longer periods of time, like swimming or jogging. The X allele of this gene then is related with a deficiency or a deficient phenotype in speed and power. Shivering thermogenesis is normally mainly carried out by slow twitch muscle fibers, which are more efficient at heat production and are better suited for the sustained contractions, which is why XX individuals have improved body temperature defense, since they have more slow twitch isoforms of myosin heavy chain and sarcoplasmic reticulum proteins. Normally, muscle shivering is a reflex response to cold exposure that leads to the rapid contractions of skeletal muscle fibers to generate heat. However, in XX individuals, there is a shift towards increased muscle tone rather than overt shivering, meaning that there is continuous contractions at lower levels without the rapid contractions that normally are involved in shivering, which means that they have an advantage since they produce more heat, but at a lower energy cost. So in 2022, Hogg and his team did a research on the knockout gene of actin-3 in mice, and they discovered that there was an intracellular change in the handling of calcium ions, which leaked from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the cytosol, and then there was a following reuptake via the SERCA protein, and then that produced heat, which this might be an alternate thermogenetic non-shivering pathway for the people that have this mutation, giving them another advantage in heat production. So the objective of this research was to reconstruct and analyze the phylogeny and the structure of the hypothetical ancestors of alpha-actinin 3 to find the residues that were most relevant to this cold resistance ability. And it was a long way. So I began by using BLAST to obtain the amino acid sequence of alpha-actinin 3 and the homologous protein sequences of related organisms. I got 136 homologous protein sequences from different species. Then I got my substitution model using MEGA, and it was determined to be the Jones-Taylor-Thornton substitution model. And with this information, I used PhyML to build the phylogenetic tree. And later, I used FireProt to get the hypothetical ancestral sequences, and Fire2 to build the hypothetical protein structures, which I then visualized using PyMol. And finally, I used Mystic to get the coevolution, to calculate the coevolutionary pattern in the sequence of alpha-actinin 3. These are my phylogenetic results. Sorry for there was a missing part. So the phylogenetic results indicated that alpha-actinin 3 is mainly present in placental mammals, but they can also be found in marsupials and reptiles. The black section is the placental mammals, and the reptiles is the darker gray, and the lighter gray is the marsupials. So this highlights the evolutionary importance and the conservation of this protein across different species, although further research is needed to understand the functional differences in the adaptations of this protein across different animals. These 5 ancestral nodes are the ones I selected, and those are their protein structures. As you can see, they are practically the same. And when we see ancestral proteins that have these very conserved structures, it suggests that any mutations that alters it can have a deleterious effect on protein function, meaning that it's not tolerated throughout evolution, And studying this can help us to get an insight into the functional and structural constraints of this protein. This information can be useful to predict other effects of other mutations in the protein and to help us design experiments to further understand protein function. This is where it gets fun, as you can see. So when certain mutations happen together, proteins are enhanced depending on the environment. This leads to a tendency of some residues evolving together because an advantage. So this is called mutual coevolutionary relationship. And these orange lines are the ones that connect these residues. As you can see, more than one residue can have more than one relationship with others. And so this slide provides this graphic representation, which was given by the multiple sequence alignment along with the mutual information corrections. Mutual information is the degree to which the occurrence of one residue in the amino acid sequence relates to the occurrence of a different residue in another site of the amino acid sequence. And these orange or red lines indicate those residues that were the top 5%, which have the mutual information value of above 6.5 bits, which indicates that they are strongly co-evolving. So these are the graphic representations of alpha-actin 3. Both panels display the same protein, but different residues are highlighted. In the first panel, the residues in pink are those that were indicated in the MSA. Can you go back? Here, these are the residues that I highlighted in pink. And yes, I did have to search them. This on the outer rim is the multiple sequence alignment. And the higher these like bands are, the more conserved these residues are. Okay, so in panel 1, they are the highlighted pink residues that were the MSA results. Hold on. Yes. And in the panel 2, the yellow head is the actin binding site of the protein. And maybe you cannot see it because it's very small, but in this N-terminal of the protein, there are some turquoise residues. Those are the calcium binding sites. And so the ones that match between the mystic coevolutionary results and the functional sites can be of functional and structural relevance during thermogenesis. And analyzing the lack of these residues can be interesting to further infer the function in this process. Okay, so in conclusion, the highly conserved residues that also match the active sites of alpha-actin 3 can be of special interest for further studies. And if we want to analyze the promiscuity of the ancestral protein structures, we will need to synthesize and test for differences in activity that can correlate with the structure. Also, molecular docking can be an interesting tool to analyze the interactions between the sarcomeric proteins in the absence of alpha-actin 3 and with an altered version of alpha-actin 3 to see how they contribute to the cold resistance in XX homozygotes, which are the individuals with this mutation. So yes, that was it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for this presentation. Is there any question that some of you may have? Or maybe on the Zoom? Is there anyone in the Zoom with any question?
Yes. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a question. Have you found, I mean, you or in any anterior reference, is it any atypical alpha-actinins in early divergent organisms? I mean, such as protozoa or yeast?
Okay, so in the phylogenetic tree, hold on. Hold on a second, please.
Yes.
The phylogenetic tree the results did not show any organisms such as protozoa and such in the, but well, we will have to see because the ancestors, which are these little balls that where the lines converge, are not cataloged because they are extinct species. They are no longer alive, and so I don't think there was many protozoa here, but well, basically, I can only see the names of the organisms that are alive today. So far, not that I know of. Was that the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, you're welcome.
Any more questions? Dr. Bernardo asked if this is like the previous step before making more projects to know how this works.
Yes, as you can see, these are very basic results, which at this point are only a head start to making more experiments, like I suggested in the introduction, for example, molecular docking to analyze protein interactions, or to analyze ancestral promiscuity and see how that affected this protein throughout evolution. And so, yes, thank you for your question.
Thanks all of you for your questions, and thanks a lot, Maria Jose. She's considering the acclimatization associated with global warming cities, is it possible to expect changes in these proteins?
Thank you for your question. So these mutations have been an advantage and are predominant, of course, in colder places of Europe, like closer to Iceland and those very cold places, which is where they are predominant. So maybe if, well, I don't know about the climate over there, but maybe if the climates like go down a lot, maybe they can start to be a disadvantage, which could turn into a selection pressure. But I doubt that with the climate adaptations that we count on today, like air conditioning or other, like, yes, air conditioning and such, that it will be something that will kill people, because that will be or that it diminishes reproduction advantage in some way. So I'm not sure that it will eventually disappear in that sense, unless it's diluted or such. But through climate change, I don't think, maybe if a catastrophe occurs, that it'll be like very extreme, maybe then. I don't know if I was clear enough. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Now, following all of this, we have our next presenters with the efficiency of natural bactericidals. Students Andrés Bustos Ferreira and Dominic Berger Rodriguez research for an alternative to fight in the modern problem of antibiotic resistance in bacteria with natural compounds like garlic, turmeric, and ginger. Their assessor was Master Maria Angelica Costa. Please give them a very big applause.
Okay, so we are going to present about the efficiency of natural bactericidals. In this case, garlic, ginger, and turmeric. Okay, so since the beginning of humanity, we have used several plants and other products because of their antimicrobial properties. And in the last 100 years, instead we have used antibiotics and antifungals to treat all the diseases caused by this type of microorganisms. But nowadays, because of the misuse and overuse of antibiotics and antifungals, several strains of antibiotic-resistant bacteria have developed, and now these type of compounds found in these plants are kind of a hope, so that we can use to combat these types of diseases caused by these microorganisms. And as a research question, it was which of the natural bactericidals, garlic, turmeric, and ginger, is the one that will have the highest efficiency in the against this bacteria, which is Staphylococcus aureus. And our hypothesis is that garlic will have the best antimicrobial effect against Staphylococcus aureus.
So for the methodology of the experiment, we first started by preparing the different solutions. We chose to prepare solutions of concentrations of 15, 30, 45, and 70% of garlic, ginger, and turmeric. And after we prepared the solutions, we cultivated the Staphylococcus aureus. And then we performed the disc diffusion method, which is an easy, flexible, and cheap technique that allows for the visualization of an inhibition zone when testing different antibacterials. And after that method was performed, we incubated the cultures for 24 and 48 hours. We checked if there was a zone of inhibition, and if there was, we performed replicas of the compounds that worked. And if there was not, then we discarded the solution as a possible antibacterial agent. And well, then we discarded the cultures. And we found that the garlic solution was the only one that worked against Staphylococcus aureus. It worked on concentrations of 30, 45, and 70%. The concentration of 15% did not show any inhibition zone, so it didn't work. And neither ginger or turmeric had inhibition zones, so we discarded them as possible antibacterial agents. And well, as we can see, here are the inhibition zones of garlic when compared to the positive control that we use sodium hypochlorite. And well, as you can see here, ginger did not have an inhibition zone. So garlic was the only one that worked. And well, we measured the inhibition, the diameter of the inhibition zones of the replicas and got an average. So, well, the 15% did not have any, but for the 30% and 45%, they had an inhibition zone of 10 millimeters. And the 70% concentration had an inhibition zone of 18 millimeters.
Using curcumin, the curcumin was purified into 3 different fractions, fraction 1, fraction 2, and fraction 3. And as you can see, only fraction 1 has a little bit of inhibition zone, but not very significant, and the other 2 basically do not have any inhibition zone. Okay, so the interpretation of our results is that garlic has a strong antimicrobial properties because of allicin. So allicin is a sulfur-containing compound, which is produced when garlic is crushed, because it is first in its inactive form, which is called allin, and then it's transformed by an enzyme called allinase into allicin. So allicin, basically what it does is that it has several mechanisms in which it inhibits the activity of enzymes that are essential for the work of the bacterial cell. First, it can bind to the thiol groups, aka the cysteine residues in enzymes, forming disulfide bonds, and these disulfide bonds will change the structural conformation of the enzyme, and this makes the enzyme basically not functioning anymore. And it also can have competitive inhibition. So allicin will bind to the active site of the enzyme, and this will inhibit the binding of the appropriate substrate. So basically, the enzyme doesn't work anymore. And the enzymes in which allicin acts is basically very basic enzymes need for metabolism and DNA replication, such as enolase and DNA polymerase. It also, as allicin has a very broad antimicrobial spectrum, it can kill several antibiotic resistant bacteria, such as methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So that is why it is very promising as an antimicrobial agent against antibiotic resistant bacteria.
Solution of 70% concentration garlic can act as disinfectant because of the active compound allicin, as Andres already explained, and that neither solutions of ginger or turmeric show any antimicrobial properties. And we are not saying they do not have them at all, but they just didn't work on this experiment. And we believe this is important because not all people have the economic resources and access to commercially available disinfectants. So doing a solution of garlic and water, it's very easy. And as we saw, it has the same effects as a solution of sodium hypochlorite. And yes, we want to thank Dr. Belmont because he provided us with the fractions of curcumin. And yeah, that's all. If you have any question.
Thanks a lot, Andres. Dr. Satarin asked if there will be more trials in different strains and the bacteria that you may have.
Well, we are not planning because we are already graduating, but I mean, if you want to, then, then if some of you want to replicate this, it's okay. And it may work on.
I think that it will be interesting to replicate this experiment in certain types of bacteria that are like responsible of the nosocomial infections. Maybe Pseudomonas aeruginosa or E. coli, like the pathogenic strains. So I think it will be interesting to test on those types of strains. Well, we did not purify like allicin per se, but according like to the literature, it was the explanation that we gathered. There was also some other compounds like the ajuin, I think it was the name of it, but through time it was also converted into allicin. So allicin is like the one that provides like most of the antimicrobial effect.
We like prepared the solution, like the 70% concentration had more garlic extract than the other ones.
It was this 20 milliliters.
Yes.
It's a volume ratio.
For the people in Zoom, is there any question that you may have?
Yes, Dr. Medina.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. There's such a thought. Can we maintain its effect without having the smell?
So basically, no, because actually allicin is the compound that gives garlic its characteristic smell and flavor. So no. Once allicin is degraded, it would not work as an antimicrobial agent, and it will well, you get rid of the smell, but you also get rid of the antimicrobial properties. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot for the interesting project. We hope to see more of you in the future. Perfect. Okay, now, today we have our undergraduate junior student Sergio Eduardo Vaca Castellanos. He will show us the effect of the direct and indirect interactions between humans and whales. He speaks about the impact on their ecosystem, migratory patterns, and behavior in response to pollution, fishing, and recreation activities. This is the importance of whales in the marine environment and the trace of human interaction. Please give him a very big applause.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, so today I'm talking about the I like having something in my hand. Today I'm going to be talking about the importance of whales in the marine ecosystem and how human interactions may interfere with that. Do I go down or do I go sideways? So, due to the migratory patterns of whales, we have a very difficult time trying to log them. There's various different ways to do this. However, tracking and satellite is very flimsy at best because we lose the distance because of the diving, and the signal is just not strong enough because of these big whales happen to transverse miles and miles to get to their target area, and also they go down deep. There was a whale that was recorded to have gone on a dive from 636 meters. So we have a lot of trouble with that, and also with the conservation efforts makes it a little bit difficult. The papers that I'm going to be talking about highlight these species specifically: the fin whale, the blue whale, the killer whale, the sperm whale, the North Pacific right whale, and the vaquita. I know what you're thinking, it's not a whale. However, it's in the same family and they do the same thing, even though they don't, dive properly. The objectives of this review is to highlight the problems that we have with conservation efforts with these marine mammals and how the human interaction interferes with that. I'm using the International Whaling Commission and the World Wildlife Fund research. However, at some point there's a bunch of other conservation people in there. Methods: countless nights of not sleeping, a lot of caffeine, working and trying to find the articles to mesh all this together. And this doesn't matter. Whale nutrient recycling. Now, this isn't very important. The whales, since they have a large migratory pattern, they play a large role in the marine ecosystem. Due to their feces, their iron-rich feces, and the migratory patterns, they have ancestral patterns, they have a very complex social structure. And there's a lot of papers, and I could go on talking about it for 2 hours. However, there is I put the CO2 and the oxygen both on the surface and deep sea levels. However, it's only mentioned. and there's no paper about it that I could find. However, I will go more into this. So, baleen whales eat krill. Krill are high in iron. This is important because iron doesn't float. Iron sinks to the bottom, and it is necessary for iron for the phytoplankton, what was it? It was the phytoplankton blooms in order to keep the iron at a surface level so other whales can actually feed. If you can see here, they took various samples from feces and the krill and some whale muscle. If you can see here in the whales, the feces, they're almost comparable to the same to the Antarctic krill right here. And that's what makes it important. The iron makes it so the iron stays in a level. So there's more krill when they graze in the phytoplankton blooms. And with more krill, there's more iron, more whales, and so forth. So on. It's a cycle that they have. Here, in the targeted areas in the Antarctic, they saw that the krill measured from 35 to 50, and they don't go bigger than 60 usually. And depending, right here is the distance, because there's a large distance that they cover. There are different types of plankton and different densities. And in the next paper that we see, the density and the size and the shape of the columns of the krill aggregations are a crucial factor to determine which spaces they should go to in order to feed and reproduce and all this. So, like I said, density is important for the aggregating behavior. Now, this paper I absolutely loved because it has a documentary about David Attenborough attached to it. This research made the documentary happen. And we can see that it is related in some degree that the whales go to the most dense and the most available krill populations in the sea. Both blue whales, right whales, and there is a correlation in iron availability and reproductive success. So as the years pass and with more laws are placed, the more whales are in the environment, so there's more iron being recycled. And if you can see throughout the years, they go from 7 cow-calf pairs to 30, even 43. So this is very important right here. Like I said, the oxygen and the CO2 levels on lower and upper levels of the ocean is crucial because there's not a lot of mixing from the bottom to the top. Usually there is, but the whales help do this. And depending on the shape of the dive, depending on the plankton availability, we see how far in they have to go in. And as you can see, there was one whale that went the extra mile and sank all the way to 662 meters. I'm sorry. So fin whales, when this is one of the few whales that actually do this, they look for the iron in other kinds of species. If they don't find it in the plankton, they try to get it from other things like Cape Cod, Capelin. There's a variety of things. So they need the iron to exist. And if I'm not wrong, this paper is a very interesting paper because it logs the before industrial hunting of whales and after. So we have like a comparison. So I think it was like 1860, something like that. And now the numbers that we have here. And there was a point where they lost like 96% of their population. And now they're going back up exactly because of the conservation efforts and all that. However, pollution is still a thing. In the blue whale, look at all these numbers. Okay, so basically what they're doing here is they tagged a couple of whales, a lot, and they saw their migratory patterns and how they overlap with vessels, with ships, and how that may be affecting them. This is very curious because it's the same guy with 2 papers that I found, and they say the exact same thing. So I'm pretty sure he just divided his research. So, you know, they tell us not to do it, but however, see, this guy is right here, and then this guy. Here is the exact same, different research paper. We can see in the Chilean Ocean, they go up and down, and then we can see that on the left side is vessel overlap, and the points which are crucial for the whales. The problem with vessel overlap is that they hit whales. And the problem with that is that sometimes they die and we cannot measure how many dead whales we have because they sink to the bottom. So we don't have an exact number of how much the impact of this really does. We know noise, we know pollution, all that, but the most important things are the direct causes of death. So, and it's very difficult to do it because once they've got to the bottom, you lose track of them and you don't know if they're alive or not. This is in California, the economic area of the bay, and you can see the interaction with humans in various places depends on how closely they are to vessel traffic or even whale watching or all that fun touristy stuff that are harming the whales. This paper includes a bunch of things, but we'll just focus on the whales. So there are protective areas, but the problem is because of the migratory patterns that they have. If you protect one area, the travel is what really messes them up. So you can't just have one area. You have to have like the whole thing, and I'm going to show it later. Again, vessel traffic and impact. The closer you get to the shore, obviously, and if you see in the middle, that is where those ships actually go out. So that's why there's more. And on the outsides, on the northern and the southern, there's less impact than the whales. Oh, this is the fun part. Vessel traffic and injuries. Here, like I was talking about before, the shark whales have a protected area in the Maldives. Maldives? Whatever. However, it's just one area. And because of the vessel traffic and the overlap and the injuries that they receive, they might not even make it. They just give up on the migratory or even change their patterns once they are hit. Because of this, it affects the ecosystem that they're not in and affects them the ecosystem that they should be in, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. I hope you're not squeamish. There we go, black and white. But this is the true effect of the damage of traffic. So you can see in this one, the fin is completely almost ripped off. And you can see a lot of whales with scars, just like me. But it's just, it's difficult to understand because, like I said, tracking and the logging and everything is very difficult and many people don't do it. Thanks to all the research done by years of research, we finally have some kind of blue pathways that we can see. So these are all the migratory patterns of all these whales, and you can see they go up and down, sideways, and left and right, everywhere. And all of these came together in order to get all these numbers together. So they're all working together. The IWC and the WWF have different conservation practices. And if you go to the IWC website, you can actually see all these plans. They have an overall and then specific ones to different whales. But we can see that noise pollution, and entanglements, vessels, traffic, tourists, trash, everything comes into play. Again, very difficult because these whales are very massive and they do a lot for the marine ecosystem that I could go hours talking about, but I only have 10 minutes. So anyway, here are my references. And do you guys have any questions? I know. Cute. Any questions, Jess? We should not exist. No, no. Ecologically, the best thing you can do. No, it's difficult because it's noise, it's fuel, it's everything that go into it. They're very pretty, but admire them from afar. Pictures or whatever. It's difficult because it also brings in like capital to the selected area. So it's very difficult managing. And that's why we have so many problems because conservation, tourism, is there a way? That's the whole problem. And then the whole the philosophy of it all. It's just very difficult. Yeah, that is sad. That's why I chose it. No, and here's why. The international and the national, very different. And since they're completely different agencies, they don't talk to each other and they don't want to talk to each other. So the whale watchers, again, they bring in capital to the local area. But then again, there's a debate, is it actually going to the local areas or just going to the companies? So is there really a pro or a con here? I just say leave them alone and, stop Amazon, I guess. Any more questions?
Check online. Yes.
No, we have a question right here. Okay. Sorry, I'll get to you right now.
What would be like the denominator and the ones that suffer the most versus the ones that the least?
Migration. Migration, the larger migration pattern that they have, like the area that they cover, the worse it is, because we can see here, nope, no, we cannot. That's fine. So there's some whales that travel very, like they go from the north all the way to the south, and they have ancestral places that they go to since who knows when. So the distance, I would say that the Vaquita Marina doesn't, I mean, there are 13 of them left, so, you know, measure however you want. However, because of the size of the whales, the density of the whales, and all this is very difficult to track how and why. I assume, depending on the vessel traffic, I would assume higher from North America to China, and from all of the ocean. It's all of it. It's all of it. It's everybody just like the dolphins. They don't migrate that much. However, they do get hit. Not, I don't know if more, but it's definitely more significant because yes, because a dolphin, a whale, you know, it's different. Yes, Doc. Yes, mostly baleen whales, migratory whales more than anything, but some baleen whales do eat fish. They're not solely krill. There are few instances because of the, like I said, iron availability. If there's not one thing, I'm gonna eat the other. However, because you're intruding into another food, so you're taking away from another kind of niche ecosystem. So the who? Toothed whales? No, no, because they find, like, again, it's the same problem. You can put it in all of it, because if they don't find one source of nutrients, they're gonna go to the other. For example, orca whales, which are dolphins, really, they eat sharks. So, and if they don't eat sharks, they eat whales. I mean, they eat other whales also. But yeah, it depends on the. It depends, really. Yeah, I'm glad I could answer that one. What I am writing. Maritime traffic for trade. Well, if you saw the graph, they go up and down. So there's no good way to do this. We could assign like one vessel traffic area from one side to the other, but there's still international travel. Maybe trucking would be better, but then again, the CO2 levels would go up the roof. So then again, conservation is a very difficult thing, which I want to go into, but there's not much money in it. But anyway, yes. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your participation. Next up, we've got the conservation of lemmings as a keystone species for the protection of the Arctic tundra by undergraduate students Luisa Elias Quintana Calderon and Itzel Santillán Delgadillo, who will talk about how the deterioration of the Arctic tundra could scale into drastic negative effects in the biosphere and how they could be reduced with the conservation of the lemmings species. Their mentor was Dr. Nicolás Ramos. Please welcome them with a round of applause.
Okay, hello everyone. We did a
Yeah. Can we expand the presentation? Can we expand the presentation? And that's the format. Oh, sorry. It's not. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, hello everyone. We did a literature review regarding the conservation of lemmings as a keystone species for the protection of the Arctic tundra. We are Itzel Santillán.
My name is Elias Quintana.
We're gonna begin.
So first we have to mention that we based our investigation on the IUCN categories. The IUCN is an organization that classifies species according to their risk status. So we can see here 14 different lemming species that are listed on the IUCN of the 30 species that are in our planet. So 13 of them are classified as least concern, and one of them is classified as data deficient. So, and the main topics of our investigation will be the conservation of the tundra ecosystems, what a keystone species is, and the conservation of the ecosystem dynamics.
Okay, so you might know lemmings because of a myth that was created because of a Disney documentary that they would jump off cliffs when their population begins to grow. This is fake. To begin with, lemmings don't live as groups, so thinking of them jumping as group wouldn't be possible. And also the strategy that they follow when the population begins to grow is to migrate and disperse into new areas, not jumping off cliffs. The objectives of our literature review is to recognize the importance of lemmings as a least concern keystone species, to describe the effect of climate change on lemming populations, to investigate the role of lemmings in the conservation of the Arctic tundra, and to research the conservation plans regarding lemmings.
So our main method of investigation was the usage of the online e-libraries of the school and the IUCN assessment in combination with Google conservational websites. All the information that we found on that and those was collected and summarized on this final presentation. So first we have to determine where the lemmings live. They are mainly located on the northern sides of our planet in habitats like the Alpine and Arctic tundra of North America and Eurasia. In this graph, we can see how 4 of the different lemming species allocate in all around the northern parts of our planet.
Okay, so lemmings are a keystone species. A keystone species is a species that plays a major role in the balance of its ecosystem. Lemmings are a primary food of many predators. They are also herbivores, meaning that they play a major role in the number of vegetation in the area. And as I already mentioned, they are very important in their ecosystem. So without them, their ecosystems would be very different or even cease to exist. Here we have some pictures of other examples of keystone species, such as an elephant, otter, or wolves. Lemmings are a key component of the tundra food webs. They play a major role in the flow of energy because they ingest the vegetation, the energy goes through them, and then it goes to their predators when they eat them.
And here we can see a great example of that, how all of those kind of plants go through lemmings and after that to the next step of the trophic chain. Here we can see how lemmings are connected to this bunch of different predators that they have. And here we can see that the main predators are the snowy owl, the red and Arctic foxes, and weasels. So they are very important moving energy from plants to other predators. Here we can see a great example of that, how the dependency of the snowy owl with the lemming population. The snowy owl nest was great when the population of lemmings were high. And in contrast with 2009, that the population of lemming decreased and also the snowy owl nesting decreased. So they are of great importance for that other species.
Okay, the threats to lemming population are logging and wood harvesting, agriculture and aquaculture, residential and commercial development, invasive alien species, and climate change. We're going to be focusing on the climate change. The climate change in the tundra is having worse consequences than the rest of the planet because as the snow melts, the heat that was before reflected outside is now being absorbed by the soil. And there are already being observed higher earth temperatures that are affecting the permafrost. The permafrost is an area that is supposed to be permanently frozen, and it stores about 50% of the global soil organic carbon. And as it is melting, the CO2 is being released into the atmosphere, worsening climate change.
So we can here see how the northern buck lemming was listed as with a moderate high risk under climate change, according to the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife in their SWAP action plan, because the changes in the condition on their sub-Nigerian habitat are affecting their performance as a community because they're exposed to temperature stress, flood risks, food limitation, and even the predator access. So we can see here why the lemming is being affected because the snow depth is diminishing. That provides protection against the predator. So if there is no snow, they will be more exposed. They have high thermoregulatory requirements. So if there is no snow, they can conserve the heat that they have in their body. So they will be in energetic disadvantage against their predators. So, and they also need the snow to reproduce. So they reproduce in winter, but if in winter there is not enough snow and places to hide, they will be affected. Their population will decrease.
Okay, now conservation plans. In this graph, we can see each color represents a geographic area. In the graph, we can see which places have been doing research activities regarding lemmings, and the one that has been doing it for the longest time is Fendoskinia in light blue. Another thing that can be observed in this graph is that in the dark blue and in the brown, we have United States and Russia, and these places are the ones that have been the most inconsistent with doing lemming monitoring activities. And with all the research that's being done, they found that there is not like really a decrease in lemming population, but they are still in need to be observed and monitored. Here we have the SWAP, or State Wildlife Action Plan of the state of Washington in the United States regarding the conservation of the northern buck lemming. In here, they say some stressors and the action needed. The stressors is that there is a lack of data on their current status and distribution, and they say that we need to determine those things. There was also a habitat disturbance by road building and by grazing. The action needed is to identify and protect the sites. And there was also a potential impact of compaction of snow by snowmobiles, and the action needed is to investigate this potential conflict. This is an example, but there is not really a conservation plan being taken into consideration. Even though many places consider lemmings as a species of major concern of conserving, no one is actually doing that, and it is important so that they take that into consideration. One thing that it's being done, but not specifically for lemmings, it's for overall Arctic biodiversity, is to create protected areas. In that map with the green line, we can see the boundary of the Arctic conservation area of Arctic flora and fauna. And in red, we can see the protected areas by the IUCN.
So our overall conclusion is that the conservation of lemmings right now is very important to preserve the ecosystems of the Arctic tundra, because we can see here how a not endangered species is as important as an endangered species. So not endangered species are also important to conserve because they are classified as least concern, and nobody is doing anything to conserve them, even though they are under risk conditions. So the conservation of the Arctic tundra ecosystems is very important for the stoppage of the climate change with the CO2. So this is our reference pages. And do you have any questions about this?
Thanks a lot, Luis and Itzel. Is there any questions by any of you or by our people in Zoom? Yes, Dr. Belmont.
Hi guys, amazing presentation. Congratulations. I enjoyed it a lot and I learned a lot. It's a quick question and I would definitely trust your opinion. Where do you think the effort of conservation is more urgent, in America or on the other side of the world? Thank you.
Important to conserve lemmings are in the United States and Canada, maybe some places of Norway, but for example, Russia, they almost didn't provide like the information that they were researching, like almost keep it to themselves. So it's important that Russia cooperates more in their conservation, like the other side of the plan.
Any more questions? Let's see.
Okay. She asked, what's the threshold to declare the species in danger, not only under risk?
Well, it depends on the number of individuals on the species and their distribution. But what puts a species under danger is the condition of the environment, because if there are multi-stressor factors affecting that species, it will be placed in a danger position. So it depends also on the number of individuals and the risk that is affecting, the different factors that is affecting that species. So any other question?
Because you did say that
Well, they measure lemming populations with a method that involves trap. They place traps along the field, and if a lemming comes across, it is captured, so it is recorded. And those results vary depending on the season, where if it's in winter, they will be moving around to find mates to reproduce. But if not, they won't be coming out of their nest because they need to conserve energy. So that's the challenge too.
And also one thing is that lemmings kind of follow the cold during the seasons. They go out of mountains or they follow where the coldest place is. So this kind of makes the challenge easier because now they know how to track them and where to look for them in each season. Yes.
This is another question by.
It's easier to save them now than when they are already in danger, because now it's just more like prevention than actually doing like something more drastic to prevent them for disappearing. It's to prevent them to start having issues with them. As an individual, it's hard to actually do something because to begin with, we don't live in those areas in where we can do like something to prevent like the snow compaction with the mobiles or something. But what can be done is try to do your best to stop climate change.
Thanks a lot for your participation. Here's a little bit for the bus. Okay. Next. Okay. Excellent. To continue, we have our undergraduate senior student, Ana Valeria Ayala Luque. Depends of the trocheophobability and how it could be imposed by the contaminations onto daily ambience with pollutants like arsenic, bisphenol A and B, and fatalities. We have pollutants exposure and its real relationship with frailty and in silico approach. Please give her a very big applause.
No, it's okay. Oh. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valeria Ayala Luque, and I'm going to present my research about pollutants exposure and its relationship with frailty. Oh, okay. Thanks. So this is my table of contents. So at the Instituto Nacional of Geriatría, we study a syndrome called frailty, or better known as syndrome of decline. This syndrome occurs later in life, where the individual does not respond correctly to stress, causing deterioration and the development of diseases. There can be several causes of frailty, physical, physiological, or social factors, and it can be measured using two broad models, the phenotype model and the cumulative deficit model. Older people who are frail have a higher risk of poor health outcomes and are less likely to be able to recover. It is important for us to being able to study frailty as we can study the aging process and how frailty helps diseases to develop, and also how can we prevent them and why do they occur. At the Instituto Nacional of Geriatría, we want to see if some pollutants play a role in the development of frailty. So the first pollutant is arsenic. The toxicity of arsenic depends on its oxidation state. It can be the pentavalent or trivalent state. The trivalent state is the most toxic one, while the pentavalent state is less poisonous and is also easier to get rid of. Both of them can exist in the inorganic or inorganic state. Inorganic arsenic species include arsenite, which is the trivalent, and arsenate, which is the pentavalent. It is known that arsenic interferes with the cellular respiration, and it can be found in water, soil, air, and also in some industrial processes or products such as production of textiles, glass production, pesticides, pigments, tobacco, and some pharmaceutical products. Later, we have bisphenol A and bisphenol B. Bisphenol A is used as a precursor of important plastics and epoxy resins, and it can be found in the development of water bottles, food containers, CDs, and even sportswear. And BPB is similar to BPA, however, it is used as a replacement for it. It is known that bisphenol have endocrine disrupting properties and also negative health effects in the development of the brain of fetuses, and also it can affect child's behavior. And it is believed that bisphenols have a correlation with high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, among others. And finally, we have phthalates, which are used for making plastics more durable or to dissolve other materials. Phthalates can be found also in making plastics, in garden hoses, or medical tubing. However, the human health effects from this exposure are not well known. And phthalates can also be found in lubricating oils and in personal care products such as cosmetics, shampoo, soaps. And this is the reason why phthalates are mostly found more in women than in men. Okay, so this research is based in the previous work of Dr. Gomez Berjan and his teammate at the Instituto Nacional de Geriatría. They published this article in 2019, and there they discovered 64 frailty genes, which out of those 64, 61 genes are going to be used in this research. Okay, so what I first did, I used the comparative toxigenomics database, which help us to understand if some environmental pollutants play a role in human health effects. And also I use a database for annotation, visualization, and integrated discovery, DAVID, which can help us to analyze the biological meaning of a large list of genes. So the first step was to find the pollutants-related genes using CTD. Then I did the Venn diagrams of the pollutants frailty intersect genes, which I'm gonna show in the next slide. Then I did a gene set enrichment analysis of gene ontology and biological processes. Gene set enrichment analysis can help us to see if a protein or a gene is upregulated, downregulated, if it's enriched or depleted, and also help us to study a group of genes that share the same biological pathway. And gene ontology considers three distinct aspects of how genes functions can be described, such as a cellular component, molecular component, or in this case, biological processes. Step 4 was to make the network connecting genes using MIRNet for us to know which proteins, transcription factors, or microRNAs are involved in the gene expression and regulation of these genes. And finally, the gene expression profiling analysis using the transcriptome analysis console. Okay, so my first results, using the 61 frailty genes and the 4,467 arsenic genes that I found using CTD, I found 23 genes shared between arsenic and frailty development. For BPA, I found 43. For BPB, I found none. However, the three of them share one gene, so I consider 44 genes shared between BPA, BPB, and frailty development. And finally, for phthalates, I only found 5 genes related to phthalates and frailty development. So using CTD and DAVID, I did the gene set enrichment analysis. I got thousands of pathways. However, using the p-value, I ended up with 11 shared pathways. In here, we can see that arsenic has a big impact in the immune system, also in the signaling pathways of it, such as the JAK-STAT, NOT-like, and even in the T-cell differentiation. And also arsenic is involved in the pathways that are involved in cancer development. For BPA and BPB, I ended up with 9 shared pathways. Also, the immune system is highly affected by them. But here we can see that the insulin growth-like factor is also affected, making like the conclusion that it can affect or has diabetic complications when you are exposed to bisphenols. And also it has pathways in cancer. And finally, for phthalates, I found 4 shared pathways. For example, the regulation catabolic processes such as glycolysis, citric acid cycle, or gluconeogenesis, and also a positive regulation of proteolysis or breakdown of proteins is affected. Then I get the network connecting genes. In yellow, we can see the genes, the transcription factors in green, and the microRNAs in blue. Later, this information can be used to develop macroarrays in order for later on study the expression and regulation of, well, which genes, these genes, which regulation or what do they do? And I got the same, well, different results for bisphenol B, bisphenols and phthalates. Okay, so my current work that I'm doing right now, I'm doing the gene expression profiling analysis using tag software of Thermo Fisher. What I'm doing is I'm collecting macroarrays of articles from 2013 until today, and I'm going to do transcriptome analysis in order to see the expression of these genes. And hopefully the goal is to publish this article later this year. So in conclusion, we can conclude that there is a positive correlation between the pollutants exposure and the development of frailty, specifically affecting the immune system, the signaling pathways, and the metabolic pathways. And more research is needed for knowing the effects of phthalates exposure, as I only got 5 genes, then no more pathways. I couldn't get more pathways that were affected. And I want to thank my advisor, Dr. Gómez Berján, and the Instituto Nacional de Geriatría for his expertise and knowledge and allowing me to collaborate with him. I also really grateful for my family, my parents, my brothers. Their beliefs in me have kept my spirits and motivation high during all this process. And also thanks to Arkansas State University Campus Querétaro for providing me the tools for making all this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Valeria. Congratulations, amazing work. I had a hint of what you were working, but now that I see the whole panorama, it's amazing. So congratulations. I have a quick question for you. Do you think that only elderly people is target to be frail?
Thank you, doctor. Yeah, mainly elderly people can develop frailty. However, of course, there are cases that younger people can also be frail, considering when they have 2 or more chronic diseases, younger people can be also considered to be frail.
Any other questions?
I agree that the work is really nice. Do you have, I know you can't tell yet because of the data that you have is still very exploratory, but do you have any ideas as to how the immune system is contributing to the development of this frailty syndrome?
So when the body finds an external, organism or material in the immune system generates these molecules called cytokines. But when cytokines are not controlled, they cause inflammation. So when they cause inflammation, they start making damage to other tissues, to other cells. So when someone is frail, these cytokines, well, actually it's you can say that if you have a lot of cytokines that are not controlled, they can say that you are frail. So the immune system has the immune system cannot control the expression or the production of the cytokines. So that's how they that's how frailty affects the immune system. Yeah, I think so.
Any more questions? Or in Zoom, any questions? Right. Since not, thank you so much, Anna, for your participation. Please give her a round of applause. Next, we got our water-burst immortal, TDPS, the circuit of tardigrades resilience by undergraduate senior students Maria Funes Romero and Dariana Nazaret Hernandez Guillen, who present a study aimed at the bioinformatic analysis of tardigrade intrinsically disordered proteins and the relation to the water-bear resistance to extreme living conditions, mentored by Dr. Bernardo Perez. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you. So, how can tardigrades survive under extreme environmental conditions that can kill almost any other animal on Earth?
Hello, everyone. We are Dariana Hernandez and Mariana Funes.
And we'll guide you through the what, how, and why of our research project.
But first, we would like to familiarize you all with tardigrades. Tardigrades are these microscopic 8-legged invertebrates that are closely related to arthropods.
And they are among the most resilient animals known because they can survive to these extreme conditions, such as high temperatures, freezing, osmotic stress, desiccation. And it turns out that this is due to their intrinsically disordered proteins, which are proteins that are highly dynamic and can maintain our three-dimensional structure.
They also allow their binding partners to induce larger scale conformational changes by transmitting a signal that will induce a structural change in another part of the protein. This is as a result of ligand binding events or chemical modifications. Intrinsically disordered proteins are really different from structured proteins, as they have different functions, they have a different structure, sequences, interactions, and regulations. There are 3 proteins that are unique to tardigrades that are intrinsically disordered, which are the cytoplasmic, secreted, and mitochondrial abundant heat-soluble proteins. These all together are called tardigrade disordered proteins. And for practical reasons, we're going to refer to them as Cas, Sas, and Mas.
Okay, so Cas are mainly expressed in cytoplasm, Mas are protecting the mitochondria, and Sas are secreted out of the cell.
These TDPs are thought to be the proteins that give the tardigrades the ability to mediate the tolerance to the abiotic stimuli that Diana just mentioned.
So beyond their high degree of disorder, Cas, Sas, and Mas families do not resemble one another. But actually, what it is currently missing is the comprehensive and holistic understanding of the mechanisms of the function and the properties of the proteins.
So what we wanted to do was to identify which were the residues that give the tardigrades, and specifically these proteins, the ability to protect these cellular components, as well to analyze and find out the evolutionary history to better understand the mechanisms of the functions.
So how we did it? First, we selected some proteins from Sas, Cas, and Lia, made a protein search in Hammer and BLAST. With that search, they gave us similar sequences so they could be compared and used in a multiple sequence alignment. With that alignment, we obtained a evolutionary model to have an accurate phylogenetic tree that basically shows the relationship between organisms, in this case, proteins, from a common ancestor.
Then we use the multiple sequence alignment from all of our proteins and loaded them into MYSTIC, which we use to estimate the coevolutionary relationship between the residues. Then, but only for our SAS protein, we use the multiple sequence alignment again and its phylogenetic tree to calculate the ancestral sequences, which we then took to ITAZR to get a prediction of the protein structure of its ancestor. Then, and now for all of our proteins again, we identified and tagged our MYSTIC results in PyMol. So here are our results. This is our SAS protein. And in the green spheres, you can observe the conserved residues. These are basically the parts of the sequence that are constant between all of our protein sequences. So we were able to identify them, by looking into our circle plot in the most outer part of it in the red dots that you can kind of see here.
So inside the circle plot, we can see some lines. We mainly focus on the red ones that are giving us the interresidue MI values that are connecting different residues. And basically it shows the coevolutionary relationship between one amino acid and another. This means that, for example, if we have one mutation on one residue, it will happen in another residue in order to compensate that mutation. So they can maintain the function of the protein. We also mark them on that protein over there. And here we have the ancestral SAS, that is the ancestor of the SAS protein that we previously showed. And we made this structure with ancestral sequence reconstruction with a computational technique that basically inferred the sequence and the protein structure using the extent protein sequences. This is a hypothetical structure. It is not actually a protein, a real protein.
So what happened basically was a computational tool used the sequences of the extant proteins and compared them to the hypothetical one that we got from our ancestor. And it used likelihood to see whether it would be viable of the ancestor to be like that.
So now here we have the Cas protein. We did the same procedure using the circle plot. We marked the conserved residues and the inter-residues MI values in the protein. So one immense question of interest is where the TDPs came from. And we found out these proteins, late embryogenesis abundant proteins, that are also intrinsically disordered proteins that have similar functions to TDPs. They stabilize the membranes, proteins, and other cellular components under stress conditions.
So are LIA proteins the ancestors of TDPs? Well, we found that they have a difference in their sequence conservation, which just basically means that their sequences are different, which then means that no, they're not their ancestors.
Well, we had another slide with fatty acid binding proteins. Nope. Okay, so we had another slide with fatty acid binding proteins that have a similar structure to SAS proteins. I don't know if you recall the structure, but it is a barrel structure. And well, we were interested in these proteins also because, we were interested in these proteins also because they were found also in our blast and hammer search because they were very similar.
So even though they were found within the range of our search, their sequence and the way, even though that the fatty acid binding proteins and the SAS proteins both act under the stress conditions, the way that they work and their function are different, and they are different within every organism that they are found.
So with the findings of this research project, we anticipate that they will be the basis of pursuing the long-term goals of desiccation tolerance field, including the engineering of desiccation tolerance crops, also the development of techniques for dry preservation of pharmaceutical cells and tissues.
So if we were able to construct the ancestors in the lab, we would be able to compare the extent, sequences, and structures of the proteins that we know that are real with the ones that were the ancestors. And with this, we would also know which are the residues that are important for each of the functions of the TDPs. So, yes.
So now we would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Bernardo Perez for his valuable guidance and support throughout this project.
And of course, we would also like to thank Arkansas State University, Campus Querétaro, for providing us with the necessary tools and facilities to carry out our project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the presentation, Daria and Mariana. It was a shame the technical problems, but is there any questions for the people here or the people in Zoom?
There's a question in Zoom.
If you want me, I can read it.
We can start reading the question.
Dr. Centeno asked, did you find any results from the NASA ISS study on the water burst tardigrades?
No, we didn't really look into that as we were more focused on finding what the mechanisms of the proteins were.
We mainly focus on the residues important for their functions.
So for the circuit plots that you had, there's some major differences between the lines that you get for each one of them. So what do you attribute that to?
Well, we can see them, but for example, I don't know if you recall, a circle plot that had a lot of lines inside, like it was diffuse, yeah, full of lines. We didn't have that much information of the proteins. We didn't have a lot of sequences, so the results were diffuse. That's why it depends on how much information we have to put in there, and yes, definitely, because some softwares allow you to a limit of sequences that you can introduce.
Yes, and that's why we didn't include them, because there was very few information on them. They weren't enough to be able to calculate one of the circle plots.
Now I feel embarrassed that my question isn't as technical. But I was wondering if you had a chance to see the water birds that we had here in house, and and what was your experience? Is it like very difficult to find them or to get samples of them, or not so much?
Oh, well. Yes, we actually saw it. It was just one, and we actually tried to find more in some samples that very kindly they were given to us, and we weren't able to find any. So yes, it was very exciting nonetheless, and it made us very happy.
There's a comment from
Oh, well, thank you for telling us. We'll definitely look into that.
Any other question, Dr. Bernardo, to your students?
I have a question.
Okay, yes, we hear you.
Thank you. I mean, this is a question because I am ignorant about this topic, but is there any evidence that the tardigrades upregulate the expression of these genes in response to drying? I mean, if so, are they used or they have been used for the development of technologies for dry preservation of pharmaceuticals, for example?
Not yet, but they have been using them in different cells and express them. But for specifically dry preservation, they haven't.
Thank you.
Oh, well, when desiccation happens in the tardigrade, some of the TTPs are involved in protecting the cellular components of the animal, which gives them the ability to survive the loss of water. Yes, that they overexpress the protein.
Any other question? Well, thanks a lot for the presentation and thanks for your participation. And well, here is a little gift for part of the school. Okay. A big applause.
Karen, I think your presentation is next one. Do you want to share the screen with the presentation?
Hello, doctor. Yeah, that will be perfect.
Fantastic. So you have the screen. Please do it without any problem. And
Yeah,
leave the
it
voice.
says, can you allow me to share, please?
There, it's not there.
No.
Oh, oh, was it?
Yeah, did you want? I can now see. Clic derecho.
Yeah. You should be able.
You should be able now.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you. I will give a quick introduction.
Yeah. Perfect.
We have genome scale strategies to study biofilm associated genes in the tooth decay pathogen Streptococcus mutans. Our undergraduate senior student Ana Karen Solano Morales gives a deeper look into the bacteria inside our mouth S mutant and the formation of the biofilm related to tooth cavities to create a TM library for a potential novel discovery. Her advisor was Dr. Robert Shields. Please give her a big applause.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. I'm doing good that it's as well in the Zoom, and I are going to present genome scale strategies to study biofilm associated genes in the tooth decay pathogen Streptococcus mutans. So Streptococcus, Streptococci mutants colonize oral cavities of the humans, and they are the primary agents of dental caries. So the most studied mutants is Streptococcus mutants. Mutants, we're going to call it that way for the rest of the presentation. They have a clear relationship with caries pathogenesis, and it can be easily manipulated. That's why it's as well studied. It has several virulence associated traits that are required to cause disease in vivo, and it's actually optimal growth in laboratory models.
So the formation of the biofilm is essential for the proliferation of S mutants within the oral cavity. So the first thing they do is they adhere to the tooth surface and they produce what we call a slime around themselves. That is what we refer to as the biofilm. And after this, there's two different mechanisms it can go through to proliferate in the oral cavity. There is either sucrose independent or sucrose dependent methods. The one that we focus on is the sucrose dependent method. And this one, it kind of works by using glycolytic pathways, and the results of that, which is oftentimes lactic acid,
causes the breakdown of the tooth enamel. And that's kind of what we're focusing on here. So our general objective is to combine both CRISPR and transposon libraries to investigate the genetic pathways for the S mutant biofilm accumulation. We've already created the CRISPR library, but now we're creating the transposon library. Our specific objectives are to identify the specific genetic elements for the biofilm establishment and persistence, and create the TN library currently. So we hope by constructing the TN library, it'll be a source for not only ourselves, but for other other S mutant researchers. And we hope to discover new genetic pathways on the sucrose-mediated attachment of S mutants to services. And we want to see if those genes are essential and can serve between liquid and biofilm growth. So the methodology here is with the assembly of the transposon library. First, we have transposons with strain UA159 that have single transposon insertions, and we colonize those onto plates. And after a 48-hour incubation period, we pick one colony one by one from the plates and put them into a 96-well deep plate. And we incubate those for 24 hours. And after that period, we take those out, create replicants, and we store them at -80 degrees for long-term storage.
So for the biofilm assay, we took out the place that we were using for the -80 freezer, and we placed them into sucrose media to let the biofilm grow. We incubated for 24 hours at 37 Celsius degrees, and we did the biofilm staining using crystal violet. After that, we read the observances in a spectrophotometer to see which mutants develop biofilm and which ones were defective mutants. So these images, as you can see, the first one, you can see the biofilm formation. In well E4, it's like it doesn't have a lot of biofilm, so it means that it's a defective mutant. So after that, we did the staining with crystal violet, and we confirmed that the color in E4 it's not as purple as you can see. It's almost transparent, so it means that it didn't develop a lot of biofilm. So after that, we did a reading into a spectrophotometer at 570 nanometers. And as you can see, E4, it's 0.088 concentrated. So that means that that mutant is effective. So the purpose of this project, as we already mentioned, is that we want to study the mutants that doesn't develop a lot of biofilm, and this is an example of one. So we did the same procedure for different plates in triplicates. So in here we show the data from plate 1 through 10. We did an average of the 3 replicates of each, and we took the wells that are 50% the average value as defective mutants. So in plate number 1, only 2 wells were showing defective mutants. So those are the ones that we're going to study. It makes sense that just a few mutants are defective, because I mean it's a Streptococcus mutant, so they are going to develop biofilm, and the ones that doesn't are the ones that we want to study.
So to continue what Karen said, our future research kind of focuses on determining those specific regions of the transposon insertions. We're either going to use PCR or Cartesian pool sequencing. Both of those are good methods to determine the location of the sequencing themselves. And we hope in the future to collaborate with the College of Engineering to determine the stress resistance on bovine teeth and compare the difference between the mutants and the normal wild type of Streptococcus to see if there's a difference there. And all of this is really important because dental caries themselves affect a large amount of people in the population. So if we can figure out how to stop this early on before having to wait till the harder or the worse ways to solve these problems, it will help with that.
So finally, we would like to thank Dr. Shields, which was our mentor, and the lab members of Shields Lab, which helped us through all of this project, the beginning of this project, as well as Arkansas Inbred that is sponsoring the project, and we are working as well with the National Institute of Health. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, we are here.
Thank you so much for your participation, Karen, Andrew. Do any member of the audience have any questions for them? Yes.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Hi, Karen. Hi, Andrew. Congratulations on your work. It's really good to see this type of endeavor that you're performing. It's amazing. I'm interested mostly because my group of work is also interested in working with mutants. And I was not aware that this is the bacteria responsible for cavities among many other species rather than just human beings. So what is the goal, the actual goal that you want to reach, like enhancing livestock quality of life, or I don't understand, or at least which are the further goals that you would like to achieve with this project? Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, we would like to detect the defective mutants to use them like to attack the ones that develop biofilm, because they didn't develop biofilm. And I don't know if you want to add something, Andrew.
So I would say a very important thing with this is lots of ways to solve like tooth decay in itself is either like with tooth extraction or through like root canals. And those are really like at the end stages of the tooth decay themselves. But if we can figure out how to stop the proliferation at the beginning, then it could help lots of onset problems that will likely come. And most people are infected with tooth decay or cavities in themselves. So if we can kind of offset this it will help. And it's not kind of a focus on just our research, but other researchers as well, is that lots of people who have health disparities in themselves often have larger amounts of tooth decay. So if there's easier, more cost affordable ways to solve this, that's kind of what we're looking for as well.
Thank you so much, guys. Is there any other questions? Seems not. Thank you so much for your participation. Please give them another round of applause. Next up, we got another dental related. Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you for your attention.
All right. So next up, we got another dental related talk with the effectiveness of mouthwash against oral bacteria, in which undergraduate junior student Silvia Arellano, with her mentor, Master of Science, Maria Angelica Costa, shares that the use of mouthwash in daily oral hygiene routines positively affects the decrease of oral bacteria species responsible for dental sickness. Please welcome her with a round of applause.
Hello, good afternoon. Before we start, I want you to please help me out. If you could raise your hand if you incorporate mouthwash or dental floss in your oral hygiene routine. Okay, so most of you. So this project is called the effectiveness of mouthwash against oral bacteria. I did it in last spring semester with my classmates, Brenda, Andres, and Frida, under the supervision of Professor Acosta. So first, we're going to have the introduction, the methods, and the results, and finally, the conclusion. So to begin with, in the oral cavity, we have one of the largest microenvironment present. And these ones include several types of bacteria like Lactobacillus, and one of the most common is Streptococcus mutans. Now, this bacteria is also known because it causes cavities, is the main cavities causative agent. And it forms biofilms, which means that it doesn't just like give you a mild infection. It just, if you let it grow and go on, it won't stop and it will be very hard to remove it. This happens by the addition to the tooth surfaces, which will form biofilms because they will start forming lactic acid and they will at the same time cause tooth decay. Now, the importance of this project is that around the world, there's 2 billion people in their adulthood who have caries in their permanent teeth. And with children, it's about 540 million children who have cavities when they have primary teeth. Now, these caries, as I mentioned, can go into complications and they can cause more severe diseases such as gingivitis and periodontal disease, which can later lead on periodontitis, which that one is even worse because your teeth start falling off and there's pretty much nothing to do for it but to replace them. And they also invade your gums. Now, they can also cause tooth decay and loss and therefore infection. And these oral diseases are the most common health condition according to the Global Burden of Disease in 2019, affecting around 3.5 billion people around the world. And the importance of this is that not every health insurance covers you for dental healthcare, and they are quite expensive. So many people are not able to afford getting that tooth out or fixing a caries or something like that. And even less more serious diseases like periodontitis. As we can see here, that first image is how a healthy gum look and how a healthy person should have their gums. But then they start with gingivitis, that is when they get red and they start bleeding out because they are very inflamed. And if you don't take care of that, they can go on periodontal disease and finally periodontitis, which is this one. And that is not the worst case scenario of periodontitis. So for these experiments, our objectives were to determine if mouthwash was actually an essential step in your daily oral hygiene, and if it would potentiate the effect of toothpaste. Now, for the second objective, we wanted to establish which of the mouthwash we use was the one with the highest efficiency rate. And all of this was to inform people like, do they actually need it and which one is the best one? So this is at the big scale experimental design. We took surveys of all the subjects, like do you brush your teeth 2, 3 times, how many times a day? Do you use mouthwash, which one? Which toothpaste do you use? Do you use dental floss? Do you smoke? And several stuff like that. And we took the initial samples. This was before they started the treatment with any of the mouthwashes we set up for them. We let them to have the treatment and the toothpaste we provided for a total days of 17 days. And we took samples every 5, and the final samples were taken at day 17. At the end of this, we took the colony forming units counting, and we did gram staining to see if any of the initial samples presented a bacteria that we could possibly relate to Streptococcus mutans. So for our negative control, we grabbed this toothpaste. It's called Melaleuca. And this one was provided because a previous study some students did here too, that they only tested toothpastes, and this one showed to do absolutely nothing, and the bacteria just kept rising. So this one was a negative control. Now the treatments, we put the Arm & Hammer toothpaste, which in the same study of our previous classmates, it showed to be the most efficient one with the highest health cavity. And we put these 3 mouthwashes, which we thought were of the most common ones. Treatment 1 was Colgate Total 12. Treatment 2 was Listerine Cool-Mint, and treatment 3 was Oral-B. Now, our hypothesis was that the addition of mouthwash into the daily oral hygiene routine with the toothpaste of our selection would reduce the amount of bacteria in the oral cavity. So our results by the end of the treatment was that within the 7 days and the first sample, the number of bacteria in mouth decreased in pretty much all the subjects. And by the end of the treatment, 82% of the bacteria were eliminated. So there was a reduction that was pretty important in just 17 days. So here we have a chart showing the progression of all treatments. Treatment 1 is purple, treatment 2 is pink, and treatment 3 is green. The black bar is the negative control we used. And as you see, they all decrease the amount of bacteria around the first samples, the middle of the trial, and the end of the treatment. However, the notoriously that worked in the highest efficiency was treatment 2, in which was Listerine cold mint. Here we have the tables with individual treatments. That one is treatment 1 with Colgate mouthwash. And as we see, the reduction of bacteria was not as significant as in here we have treatment 2 with Listerine. They have the same negative control and they have the error bars. And this final one is treatment 3 with Oral-B mouthwash. This one, it was also quite effective, but the biggest reduction was seen in treatment 2, as we can see here, the table. Bacteria passed from having the highest colony forming unit counts to the least ones, in which we even had 0 counts. That obviously doesn't mean that the mouth doesn't have bacteria, but it means that there were not enough in the sample we take, like for them to form colonies in the Petri dishes. So our conclusion was that all subjects which underwent the treatment had fewer bacteria in their amount by the end of it. And that treatment 2, which was Listerine cold mint, had the biggest reduction rate. In addition of the Maraleuca toothpaste, which I think we changed in every subject because none of them were using it in the beginning. And here are the references, if you have any questions. We had 12 subjects. 3 of them were the negative control, and the rest were distributed between the treatments. Yes, I think there is. The thing is that we were very limited when picking subjects and the controlling of what they did throughout the day. So I think that maybe the change of toothpaste or the fact that they knew they were being tested made them more focused on their routine, that made them wash their teeth like we were asking them to, because some people only wash them twice a day. I think there was even one subject that said that sometimes he just watched it once a day. So maybe that also helped with the results. Yes, we also concluded that for more accuracy, we should prepare like a second treatment, but to be more rigorous when we pick our subjects and the routine, because we were not able to put the parameters, because we were working with such a small group and the school, and we have to take samples. So most of our subjects were in the range of 18 to 22 years old, but there were 2 subjects that were over 40. So the age also contributes to the bacteria forming, and some of them were smokers, some of them chew gum, some of them had braces. So all of those parameters, we said that we could reduce them in order to have a higher accuracy. Anybody else?
Thanks a lot, Silvana. Thanks a lot, Silvana. It was a very interesting question, and thanks for your presentation. Is there any question for the people in Zoom, or another question for the people here? Let's see. Oh. It seems that there are no questions. Thanks a lot for the presentation, and thanks a lot for the participation. Here's a little gift, and thanks a lot. Okay. The next one is also in online.
No, she's here.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. For our next topic and presentation, we have conservation of fallings in Mexico by our undergraduate junior student, Laura Berenice Reyes. She will show us the importance of the presence of fallings in threatened species and the possible effects of their absence due to human-caused factors like habitat destruction and hunting. Please give her a very big applause to Laura Berenice Reyes.
So, good afternoon. My name is Berenice Reyes, and today I will be presenting the literature review about conservation of felines in Mexico. Mexico is home of 6 feline species. We have the jaguar, the jaguarundi, the margay, the ocelot, the bobcat, also known as lynx, and the puma. And their distribution are quite similar. In general, they go from the south of the US or the north of Mexico to Argentina. The only two that has like a different distribution is the bobcat. They have a distribution from the south part of Canada to the south of Mexico. And the puma is the one who has the higher distribution. We had the distribution from Canada to the tip of Chile. Felines play an important role in the ecosystem since they, as predators, regulate the population size of the prey they consume, and this help they help maintaining the dynamics of the ecosystem. So, well, the objectives of this literature review is to evaluate the present status of the felines based on literature, to evaluate the conservation plans from governmental and non-governmental organizations, and to disseminate the information collected from this review. For this, general information about the felines was collected, then the threats causing their decline, and lastly, the conservation plans. And many databases were used. The main ones were the DMB Edit Library, Google Scholar, and Science Direct. So unfortunately, felines have been declined dramatically in the last decades because of a variety of reasons. The main threats that they have is the habitat, that can be the loss or the fragmentation of the habitat, hunting, the conflict with human, trade, bycatch, and disease. And as we can see in this graph, the most important threat is the habitat. It affects the 88% of all the felines that are threatened and the 61% of all the felines. Another important part of the decline of felines in Mexico are roadkills. There have been reported 150 events of roadkills, and we can see in this map that is the states that has the most events are Baja California Sur and Campeche. Then we also have the hunts because of the predation of livestock. And again, because they are predators, sometimes they kill the livestock of people and then people hunt them to avoid this. And from 22 records of elite attack, 152 were by jaguar and 70 by pumas. Another big problem nowadays are the online markets. And because many people sell like the actual specimens or part of the specimens in internet, And we can see here that the cities with the most online sales of the Jaguar, it's Tehuacan, Cholula, and Mexico City. This was a really interesting paper, and they create a digital survey to know which were the most common products they saw in these online markets. And we can see that the most common one is the skin, followed by the tusk and the actual live specimens. So because of all of this, 4 out of the 6 feline species that we have in Mexico are in some category of risk. And we have 2 lists. We have the known 059 from the Summernet, published on 2010. And we have the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List, also published in 2010. The IUCN is an organization that classifies specimens because of the risk they have. And for the IUCN, we can see that the ocelot, the lynx, the jaguarundi, and the puma are considered as least concerned, while the jaguar and the margay are considered as near threatened. And then we have that for the Summernet, the jaguarundi is considered as threatened, and the ocelot, the margay, and the jaguar are listed as endangered. These 2 lists have differences, since the IUCN is considered the populations, like the global populations, and the Summernet only considered the ones from Mexico. And because of this, it is important to create conservation plans. And in this literature review, we will only focus on the small felines that are the jaguarundi, the margay, and the ocelot, and the jaguar, since as we observed, the bobcats and the puma are not yet in any category of risk, so there is not a lot of research or conservation plans for them. And it is important to mention that the large felids are part of a group called the umbrella species, whose conservations help in the conservation of other species that live in their ecosystems. For the small felines, we have the Species Conservation Action Program proposed on 2018 by the CONAM, the government of Mexico, and the Summernet. And in general, they have the goal to create and promote actions to protect these species. Then for the jaguar, we have a pretty similar one. We have the action program for the conservation of the species proposed by the government of Mexico. And again, they want to consolidate, promote, and implement specific actions that will help in the protection of them. And it was published in the 2009. For the jaguar, we also have the Jaguar Plan of 2030, and this is created by different organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, Pancera, the WTS, and the UNDP. And this plan looks to strengthen the jaguar corridor that is across 30 countries by protecting one landscape for each country. And we can see here the countries that take place in this plan. And lastly, we have the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, or CITES. And this is an international agreement between governments to ensure that the trade between the specimens don't affect their survival. And well, the CITES have different appendixes, and our 4 felines of interest are in appendix number 1, which are the species that are threatened with extinction, and the CITES prohibits their trade unless they have a specific permission, and it couldn't be because of commercial trade. It needs to be because of a reason of research or a scientific purpose. Even though there is plenty of information, there's still need to make a lot more research about these felines. And also the government of Mexico needs to update the plans, because as we observed, the one of the jaguar was from 2009. Another problem is that the norm of the Summernet needs also to be updated. it should be updated on 2020, but because of the pandemic, it has been like postponed the update. And it's a crucial tool to create new plans. Also, research about the leaks and the puma must be done, even though they are not in any category of risk yet. And this kind of literature review is important to acquaint people of the status of the specimens. So here are my references, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Berenice. Does anyone in the audience have a question for Berenice?
Even there is like not like a specific place in Querétaro, but some of them like to this. And mineral are, for example, the bosque, I'm sorry, the puma, and we can see here also the mark game. Yeah. Any other question? Ah. Oh, okay. You. Thank you.
Have there been any type of documents to mitigate the impact of the Tren Maya that they're building for these conservation efforts?
So there have been some papers. I don't include them in my investigation, but there are some papers that talk about the impact. The problem is that the government of Mexico don't care. So even though there is a lot of research about the impacts because of the fragmentation of the habitat, there is no like any like response for the government. Yeah. Yeah, and we can see the habitat fragmentation and loss is the main threat for these felines.
Thank you, Vera. Congratulations, Berenice. This breaks my heart, to be honest, but I think the conversation needs to be start. So it's a pretty good effort, the one that you put into this, and so I want to congratulate you. I also want to ask, I know that a couple of years ago, a lot of sightings of jaguars were spotted in Texas. Do you know why was this? Do you think this has to do with the fact that they need to migrate more? Or do you think that new populations are being spotted just at the north of Mexico? Thank you.
I actually don't know if it could be because of the migration. It is supposed that actually the distribution of the jaguar is still in some part of the southwestern of the US. So supposedly the distribution should be on Texas. I don't know really, but I think that, for example, in some places, maybe on Texas has like the distribution is there, but the people start like seeing more often. So I think like in Texas, there is not like a lot of felines in that area, and maybe the thing that people saw are like, oh, now we have the felines, but the distribution it should be actually in Texas. Okay. You have another question?
Yes. With your relation to the Tren Maya question, many Mexican felines have environmental similarities, mainly at the south of our country where the train is. Therefore, these species can use the same resources simultaneously. My question is, due to this, does it may potentially engage in negative interactions such as exploitation or interference, competition? I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, the felines have like similar habitats, and the competition between them is going to be increased if you like fragment the habitat, because you are also fragmenting the niche they occupy. And if you like overlap a lot of species, then this will create more competition. So yes, if you fragment the habitat, then you will create more competition of like each side of the road.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much again, Berenice. Here's a little present for you. And I would like to ask for another round of applause. The next topic to be presented is the development and standardization of the university's histology laboratory. The undergraduate senior student, Diego Aznar, presents his posture on the importance of a histological laboratory in ASUCQ, the benefits for his students, and the possible projects for the future.
Okay, so hello. I hope everyone has been enjoying the presentation. So let's get started. My name is Diego Aznar, and today I'm going to talk about the development and the standardization of the histology lab here at the university. So maybe some of you have heard about this course called histology that has been offered for the first time here at our campus last semester and will be offered next semester again. So if anyone is interested, I hope I can get your attention here. So following on that, histology, because we have heard the word, but what is the field of study of histology? So can I see a show of hands? Anyone wants to say whatever comes to their mind about what is histology? What does it study? Tissues, right, over there. Tissues, yes, that's like the textbook definition of histology. The study of tissues, right? But to be honest, that sounds kind of simple and boring. So let's go with a different definition. That will be the study of microanatomy, because just as we have macroscopic anatomy, which deals with bones, muscles, organ systems, we also have microanatomy, which deals with cells that eventually build tissues and organs, right? So speaking about cells, human bodies, of course, have billions of cells, but the question is, are they all alike? Are they different? If they are different, how are they different? So just as there's like this central dogma of molecular biology, we could say that histology has its own central dogma, which will be that function and environment determine the shape of the cells. Because take, for example, your kidneys. So, well, if we think about the functions of the kidney, it's supposed to filter blood, it's supposed to produce urine, reabsorb some nutrients, excrete others. So you will guess that the cells from the kidney should be able to let liquid flow through them. So obviously it will be quite different from the ones, for example, on your muscles, right? Which have a completely different function, and therefore they have a completely different shape. For example, here the cells are quite small, and you can see there are lots of them, but in here, actually, each one of these muscle fiber is a cell. They have a lot of nuclei, that's why they are so big, but you can compare the sizes, and you can tell that they're quite different, and that's because of their function. So that's like the basic principle of histology. Okay, so why bother with histology? I mean, yeah, it's very nice, the cells and the tissues, but what's its purpose here at our university? So first, we can use histology as a basis for understanding physiology, physiological procedures, processes, sorry. And of course, whenever they are not working properly, disease. So let's take, for example, oh, there's the image. So here we have a lung. And well, we know the function of the lung, that is we breathe in air and it's supposed to do a gas exchange with the blood. So cells can get the oxygen they need to continue surviving. So the lung should be able to let air flow through it, right? And here, for example, you have, this is a bronchiole, which is one of the tubes inside the lung that conducts cells towards the alveoli. And as you can see, it's filled with cellular debris. So you can tell that this patient was having some trouble breathing before the slide was processed. So we can tell this just by looking at it. So it's very useful for understanding physiological processes and disease. And now it also has an importance in research and industry because we can alter the, well, obviously like in any goods experiment, we can alter the conditions that a tissue faces, and then we can test the responses. So it's very standard tool for research. And also in industry, particularly in the medical industry, we have a lot of diagnostics that depend on histology. For example, cancers, a lot of cancers can be diagnosed with the preparation of histological slides. So it's quite useful there. Then we have a very, well, I believe one of the most important aspects for here in the university. Fortunately, we are already leaving this behind, you know, the trouble that the pandemic and the online courses brought upon us. So unfortunately, some people, some students were not able to get the experience, the hands-on experience they needed. And this is a new opportunity to recover that lost time with something that will actually be, because I mean, to be honest, the lab simulations were not cutting it, but now we can have a new experience, right? Now, we also, well, as I mentioned, it's very useful in research. So now we have a new way to conduct research within campus because sometimes students need to go to other places here in Querétaro, or they need to do their internships back at home during the summer, but not anymore. Well, at least they have a new way to conduct research here within campus because of the project we have built. Okay, so as any good project, we established some objectives at the beginning, which I will mention. First one was to standardize a histological technique. I will tell you about this in a moment. Next one was to create the base slide collection, the base microscopic slide collection, and to produce a lab manual. So let's go with what was done. Okay, so I've been talking about histology, and now I just mentioned that one of the objectives was to standardize the histological technique. And what do I mean by this? Okay, so the histological technique is the process you follow to prepare a microscopic slide from a tissue sample, from an animal, from a human, whatever. So, and it involves some steps, well, they are a little bit more complex than that, but this is just like the basic steps that every histological technique should follow. So first we have, okay, so first we have, well, it's not part of the physiological technique, but of course you have to get the tissues from the animals. Then we will begin with the actual technique, which will begin with fixation. So this is just to preserve the tissues because as they are biological, well, they are cells, they tend to decompose, right? So we want to preserve them to make the slides. So that's the first step, fixation. Right there, for example, you have a flask with some organs from a rats. They're being fixated in formaldehyde to preserve them. Then we have inclusion, which consists on taking these organs, like these organs are complete, taking them into well, it's called paraffin. It's like a wax, this wax mold, so they can be cut. So they're small blocks like this size, and these molds are then, well, blocks are then placed in the device called the microtome, which is this one right here for the next step, which is cutting. And then you use a very sharp and fine blade to make cuts, like these little strips of tissue that are like 5 to 15 micrometers thick, so very, very, very delicate. They break easily, and it takes actually some practice to do this correctly, but you get there eventually. And then you mount these strips of tissue into actual the slides, which then you can stain, such as in this photograph. We have a routine hematoxylin and eosin staining, which gives us purple and pink coloration. So that's like the final step to actually see the tissues and its properties under the microscope. So the whole project revolved against, was focused on this the histological technique, because I mean, there's already protocols and such, because obviously this is a very standard procedure in a lab, but we had to make it work with the reagents and equipment that we have here, right? So we have to make things work with the things we have here. So let's review the objectives. First one is to standardize the histological technique, which was done. We already have the procedure for anyone to do it. We already have everything in lab. Next, we have to create the baseline collection, which was done because we already made over 100 slides from 20 different organs. We also made, the lab manual, which is a process for anyone to follow. This is a great part because you don't need to have, I mean, it's desirable that you take the course, but anyone who reads the manual can do this process if they want to create their own slides. This is a small collection, a small representation of the collection we have done so far. Okay, so the importance of this. So as already mentioned, this will be a new opportunity for students and faculty to perform research, to learn, because these slides can also be used for other courses. We're also introducing and sparking interest for a relatively unknown field, because to be honest, histology is not that like very well known. Most people, even biologists have just like a rudimentary knowledge about the tissues, like their fundamental tissues, but there's quite a lot more than that. We can, as already mentioned, we can deliver real experience for students that could be useful, because I mean, when can you say that, oh, I know how to prepare microscopic slides for pathology, for diagnosis, for research? So it's very good. And well, the sky's the limit, because this, what I showed you, is just with the routine H&E staining, but we have a lot of different stainings, which for example are differential, and each colorant gives a different substance. And also there's all applications, so because you cannot only stain with colorants, you can also stain with antibodies. So this one, for example, is for a diagnosis of cancer. These are it's a lung cancer, and the brown staining is with antibodies. So it's a powerful diagnosis tool. And well, here are my references. And just before finishing, I would like to thank very much Dr. Lucia Satrain, because without her, this project would have not been possible. And also Dr. Nicolás Ramos for his counseling and his advice throughout the project. So thank you very much. Oh, any questions?
Thanks a lot. Is there any questions for anyone here in the classroom or for some of our judges via Zoom?
I think there's a question.
Yes, Dr. Perez has a question.
Just to get a general idea, how long does it take, let's say from step A to step D, because you showed like 4 steps in general, let's say that you get a rat. So let's get an idea of how long will it take to go from the moment that you get the rat until the moment that I get this beautiful histological samples of, let's say, a kidney. Am I correct to say that? Yeah. Okay. Just to get an idea of the amount of work that you've done in building this collection.
Okay, so, well, as I mentioned, there's different steps to the process, and some of them rely on, well, you have to wait for some time because the reagents need to do their job, right? They take some time. So if you're really efficient and have like everything to go one thing after the other, you will take like, I don't know, maybe 3 days, 2 or 3 days if you worked quite efficiently. But with the number of slides we have been making, well, this has been a project that has lasted for weeks because, yeah, it takes some time. And especially you, for example, on some steps, you need to have the wax, the paraffin, it needs to be melted. So you have to arrive some hours earlier for it to get, to set the oven and to melt it. So yeah, it takes some time. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the question says, are you related to image interpretation technologies through artificial intelligence and neural networks? Do you think it is important to learn to interpret images or learn to promote how to interpret an image or hybrid method? Okay, so as I mentioned, the making of histological slides is a very powerful diagnostic tool. So yes, there are some efforts being guided to use artificial intelligence to present them images from microscopic slides and for them to detect possible pathologies. But I mean, yeah, it's a very important tool and it will make the process much more efficient, but you still need to make the slides. And actually we were just joking about that about maybe artificial intelligence taking a lot of jobs in the coming years, but unfortunately for GPT or ChatGPT, but fortunately for us, there's someone who still needs to perform the slides. So it will be, yes, like a hybrid effort to create the slides and feed them to the artificial intelligence. But yeah, it's an interesting approach. So, yeah.
So my question is, what do you think are the next steps to improve the histological lab here on campus?
Okay, so the next steps will be to, well, because we need more tools, more reagents. For example, I talked about a little bit about immunohistochemistry, which is, can you put slide number 8, please? Slide number 8. Right. So as I mentioned, that application immunohistochemistry is very useful because you can not only see the tissue, you can also test for certain molecules or antigens present in the tissue. So the next step will be like spiking interest in the community because there's no point getting these tools if there's no one to use them. So fortunately, with the next semester class, there will be a spike in interest in histology, and we could get some of these new tools because, for example, for this one, you just need some reagents and good quality antibodies. So it will be an interesting approach to spike on the interest in this because, as I mentioned, it will be a very valuable, very polyvalent tool for research within campus. So I think that's the next step to getting more interest, and if we get the interest, getting more reagents and equipment.
Well, thanks a lot, Diego. I think most of us are pretty interested. And well, here's a little present from part of the committee. Well, after beginning with the next and last presentation, we want to ask, is by casualty here Dante Didier Lopez Villegas? Is by Dante Didier Lopez Villegas and María Fernanda Estrada? Via Zoom or here?
Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow.
So I make the conclusion.
Yes.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for our speakers and presenters, and as well to our professors helping these young students, as well as the judges that came here. We want to remember you to don't forget to send the evaluations for the different presentations. And if you, the judges are here, if you could come here, please.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay.
Well, if the judges want to come here,
Presented.
you see presented. And more to. Okay,
Thank you very much for your help.
thanks. Hello, Dr. Hugo.
I'm very honored to be here. It's my pleasure. The first time here. I'm amazed by the unity, by the university, by the presenters, the professors. So I'm very glad for your kind input.
You're gonna be with us also tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, we hope you to see you also tomorrow, and to the judges that are online. We hope the opportunity that any of these days and next years you will come as well.
Thank you.
Thanks all for your attention, and this will be all for today. So we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and surely I'll be here for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Good day and a good evening. Afternoon. Yeah.